Thank you, my people. We look at the culture of our people. We keep praying in our language. We use the drum. And that's why we pray. That's what I'll say to you. We use this to help each one of us, what we do within our faith, our culture. Someday we bring it to the people, to the Creator. Some things that we ask, we show it to the other people in all the other world.
This is your last day together as an assembly, so you've come to the end of this road, and you will all start new roads from here. I will sing you a song. It's a song about the land. It's about traveling on the land. It's about being alone, facing the winds and the elements. It's about embracing everything that is around you. The people, the communities, the different peoples that we are that choose to live together. It's about the mountains. It's about the river and the lakes and the ocean. It's about calling the spirit of the land that sustains us, that we all may find a way to connect to a land that loves us, that takes care of us. And this is a song that you could remember as you travel and as you see the land that is all around you. Thank you.
Masik, please be seated. Good morning, members. Minister's statement. Minister Akwetlan Goddaninde, Minister of Lands.
Mr. Speaker, I seek unanimous consent to conclude all minister statements filed with the clerk today.
Merci. Members seeking unanimous consent to file all the statements that he highlighted today. Are there any nays? There are no nays. Minister of Lands.
Monsieur le Président, le Bureau des titres de biens-fonds du GTNO s'occupe d'enregistrer et de protéger tous les renseignements sur les titres de biens-fonds au territoire du Nord-Ouest. Dans le passé, ces dossiers publics étaient seulement disponibles pendant les heures du Bureau. De plus, s'il était nécessaire de consulter le fichier réel, il était seulement possible de le faire au registraire. Afin de permettre à tous les témoins de consulter la documentation relative au titre de bien-fonds à l'endroit et au moment où ils en ont besoin, le ministre de la Justice a créé et lancé une solution en ligne qui offre un accès en tout temps à partir de tout ordinateur. Le nouveau système des titres de bien-fonds des territoires du Nord-Ouest en ligne permet aux utilisateurs de consulter les documents comme s'ils étaient au bureau du registraire. Le système est entièrement bilingue en français et en anglais. Ce service de consultation de documents constitue un outil utile pour les avocats, les arpenteurs géomètres, les administrateurs des terres et pour le public en général, qui leur permettent de vérifier le titre de propriété des terres arpentées privées et de déterminer qui possède un intérêt dans les terres. Puisque ces renseignements constituent la base des transactions immobilières, il est primordial qu'ils soient très fiables. Le nouveau système en ligne offre un accès convivial en tout temps aux renseignements sur toutes les terres enregistrées au bureau de titre de bien-fonds. Cet accès concerne également des certificats de titre, les plans d'arpentage et les documents connexes. Tous ces documents peuvent être téléchargés et imprimés sur le champ. La possibilité d'effectuer les recherches en ligne fera économiser des milliers de dollars en temps aux professionnels et aux gens qui devaient effectuer des recherches dans les documents papier. Les résidents de nos petites collectivités ont maintenant le même accès immédiat au système. Le personnel du bureau est encore disponible pour les personnes qui doivent ou préfèrent travailler avec le registraire et en personne ou par téléphone, télécopier ou courrier. Sur le président, le système des titres de bien-fonds des territoires du Nord-Ouest a été lancé le 21 mai 2019 et fonctionne très bien. Il compte déjà plus de 200 utilisateurs inscrits. Les commentaires des membres du public et des professionnels sont positifs en soulignant notamment que ce nouveau moyen d'accès constitue une grande amélioration. Le ministre de la Justice s'engage à améliorer la façon dont les services sont offerts afin de maximiser leur efficacité. Cet engagement constitue également à assurer que tous les témoins ont le même niveau d'accès à l'information dont ils ont besoin pour importer leur lieu de résidence à OTNO. Mr. Speaker, the N.W.T's Land Titles Office is responsible for recording and maintaining the validity and security of all land titles information in the Northwest Territories. These documents, these public records have previously only been available during office hours, and if requirements were needed to view the actual file, these files could only be examined in person at the registry office. In order to allow citizens throughout the Northwest Territories the ability to review land titles documents where and when they need them, the Department of Justice has developed and launched an online solution that will allow access on a 24/7 basis from any computer. The newly designed online Northwest Territories land title system allows the user to view the registered documents as if they were being viewed at the registry office. The system is fully bilingual in French and English. The ability to view these documents is valuable to lawyers, surveyors, and land administrators, as well as the public, so that they can verify the ownership of privately owned surveyed lands and determine who holds an interest in the lands. As this information is relied upon mainly in real estate transactions, the need for reliability is of utmost importance. The new online system provides easy 24-hour-a-day access to information about any parcel of land that is registered with the Land Titles Office. This includes access to certificates of title, plans of survey, and associated documents. These documents can be downloaded and printed immediately. The ability to search online will save thousands of dollars in time for professionals and for people who previously had to physically search files. Residents of our smaller communities will have the same immediate access to the system. For those who need or would prefer to work with the registry in person or by phone, fax, or email, staff will still be available to assist. Mr. Speaker, the Northwest Territories Land Title System was launched on May 21st, 2019, and I hope I got that date right in French, but if I didn't, that is the date, and is operating smoothly. User uptake has been very good, with over 200 registered users to date. Feedback from members of the public and professionals has been positive, and many stating that the new method for access is a vast improvement. The Department of Justice is committed to improving the way we provide services in the most efficient and effective way possible. This includes ensuring that our residents have the same level of access to the information that they need, no matter where in the N.W.T. they reside. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mussy, took you 4 years to do a statement in French, but it's worth it. Minister's statement. Minister Ikegoden, the minister responsible for status of women.
Mr. Speaker, today there are increasing numbers of women leaders who are working at the local and regional level for the betterment of our communities. But only a handful of women have ever taken seats in this legislative assembly. Mr. Speaker, it's time to change that. Our governing bodies should be representative of the populations they serve, and women make up half of our population. We need more women in political leadership at all levels, but especially here in this House. We are seeing progress. The municipal elections in the fall of 2018 saw several women being elected into positions as mayors and councillors throughout the territory. Several of the successful candidates represent a younger demographic, and that's great news for the future of our territory. Mr. Speaker, these women candidates succeeded with support from family, friends, donors, and campaign workers. But it all starts with the women themselves. Each woman who puts their name forward inspires women throughout the Northwest Territories to run for office, whether it's for the local education authority, a municipal council, an Indigenous government, the Legislative Assembly, or the Parliament of Canada. The results of the municipal elections last year show that Northerners do see women as leaders who belong in the political realm. Better yet, more and more women see themselves as leaders. Mr. Speaker, every member of this House has been concerned about the low numbers of women in leadership, especially on boards and agencies and in political leadership at the territorial level. The mandate of the 18th Legislative Assembly committed our government to improving gender equity on boards and agencies and to take steps to increase the participation of women in politics. The government of the Northwest Territories has sponsored campaign schools for women over the term of this Assembly. Some of the successful municipal candidates last year were past participants of these workshops. We've also developed a Made in the North curriculum to support the workshops. In developing this training material, we sought and received input from women across the Northwest Territories, and the training material is designed to apply to any elected position. I want to extend my heartfelt appreciation to the Native Women's Association of the Northwest Territories and the Status of Women Council, who worked with us to pilot this training material. I'm also happy to report that a communications campaign has been designed to help increase the number of women seeking political office by reinforcing the message that women are capable leaders. Phase 1 of the campaign was launched this month, and it will run until nominations for the territorial election close in the first week of September. Phase 2 will run from October 24th to November 15, leading up to the municipal elections in 9 communities. Mr. Speaker, I'm proud of the support that this government has provided to women in an effort to increase their representation in the Legislative Assembly. This House established a special committee to increase the representation of women in the Legislative Assembly and unanimously supported each of the recommendations made in the final report. I was also pleased to provide funding for a very successful initiative led by the member for Yellowknife Centre and the Yellowknife Women's Society, who offered a series of workshops and networking opportunities to prepare women to run for the Legislative Assembly. We see evidence of the positive impact of our work in the number of women who have already announced that they will put their names forward in the upcoming territorial election. All of us in this Assembly, both men and women, have done our part to promote women in elected positions during our term to fulfill our mandate commitments. Mr. Speaker, I have more good news. We're not alone in our quest for gender equity in political life. The Government of Canada is stepping up as well. On August 8th, I was with the Member of Parliament for the Northwest Territories, Mr. Michael McLeod, to announce new funding for our government from the Government of Canada. On behalf of the Honourable Marion Monsif, Minister of Women and Gender Equity, MP McLeod announced $525,000 in new funding to bolster our own investment in women's leadership initiatives. This funding will be used to create a new online portal for the Campaign School for Women that will allow us to reach more residents more often. It will help us continue pilot testing the new Made in the North Campaign School curriculum with additional workshops throughout the Northwest Territories, and it will help continue our communications campaign to encourage women to enter politics at all levels. Mr. Speaker, I'm happy to report that the mandate commitments of the Government of the Northwest Territories to support the delivery of workshops that help to get women into politics and to support a communications campaign to increase the participation of women in politics has been achieved. But our work is not yet done. It must continue until women are equally represented at all levels of elected leadership. Mr. Speaker, this government has worked hard to increase the number of women in politics. I would like to thank all the inspiring women who have decided to run in the upcoming territorial elections. It's time for women to take their seats at the table and in this House. The Territory wants more women leaders. We need their talents at all levels, and we will make it happen. Merci, Mr. Speaker.
Merci. Member statement. Member Ike Godani, the Honourable Premier.
Mr. Speaker, as the 18th Legislative Assembly comes to an end, now is a good time for us to look back at the past 4 years and the good work we have done together for the people of the Northwest Territories. The 18th Assembly has been the first full assembly since the federal government devolved responsibility for public lands, resources, and waters to the government of the Northwest Territories. Devolution significantly increased the responsibilities of the government of the Northwest Territories and expanded the areas in which this Legislative Assembly has legal authority. At the time of devolution, the 17th Legislative Assembly mirrored existing federal legislation, making the decision to first devolve and then evolve. It fell to the 18th Assembly to do the heavy lifting on the evolved part of the equation. Devolution was just the beginning, Mr. Speaker. It was this Assembly that had to do the hard work of understanding our residents' priorities for newly devolved authorities and turn them into sound legislation and policy to reflect Northern views and aspirations. I am pleased to say, Mr. Speaker, that we were up to the task. The first made in the Northwest Territories Mineral Resources Act will receive assent today, setting out for the first time ever how the government of the Northwest Territories will manage the rich reserves of mineral resources we share in line with the views and priorities of Northern decision makers. We have also amended the Petroleum Resources Act and the Oil and Gas Operations Act to take into account our new responsibilities and reflect Northerners' priorities. Part of managing the land and resources of the Northwest Territories responsibly include making our own decisions about how land will be protected and conserved. A new Protected Areas Act passed this past June now gives Northerners the legal tools for creating a network of permanent protected areas that conserve the ecological and cultural worth of the Northwest Territories' most valued places. We have updated and modernized the Environmental Rights Act, establishing the requirement for government departments and certain public bodies to consider a statement of environmental values in their decision-making and mandating a State of the Environment report. We have passed a new Public Land Act, bringing together two previously separate regimes for managing public lands in the Northwest Territories and setting the stage for further development of a more unified approach to land management. Work to strengthen and improve the Government of the Northwest Territories' approach to managing land and resources will continue, Mr. Speaker, including work on the Waters Act and the Forest Act. But the work we have done in 4 short years to establish a new Made in the North legislative regime for land and resource management is an accomplishment we should all be proud of. Another priority for Northerners, Mr. Speaker, was improving government openness and transparency, and our government has responded. During this term, this Assembly passed the Ombud Act and appointed the first ever Ombud for the Northwest Territories. Following a comprehensive review undertaken by the Government of the Northwest Territories, this Assembly also made significant amendments to the Access to Information and Protection of Privacy Act. We have complemented this legislative work with the creation of our government's first ever open government policy, including a new guide to public engagement that will help ensure we are taking a consistent approach to soliciting the views of the public on important matters of public policy and factoring those into our work. Mr. Speaker, we have worked together to pass several important pieces of legislation to protect public health and safety, including the Northwest Territories 911 Act, which will provide for a territory-wide 911 service beginning this fall. We also passed a new Emergency Management Act. Responding to legislative changes at the federal level, Mr. Speaker, we passed the Cannabis Legalization and Regulation Implementation Act. We have also passed new legislation to control and reduce smoking and legislation to control the sale of tobacco and vapor products. Mr. Speaker, in all, we have considered 93 bills, including money bills over the past 4 years, representing a significant amount of work. Over these 4 years, the Government of the Northwest Territories has also invested in initiatives meant to advance the priorities of the 18th Legislative Assembly and better serve the people of the territory. Together, we have invested more than $82 million in health, wellness, and education initiatives, including $33.5 million in health services, $17 million in children's programs, nearly $11 million in long-term care and seniors, and $6 million in shelters and vulnerable populations. We have invested $29 million in community operations and safety, including $12 million in housing, $7.5 million to address the cost of living, $5 million for community government operations, and $2 million for 911. We have invested $22 million in climate change and another $5 million in the environment, Mr. Speaker. We have also invested more than $42 million in the economy and labor market, including $14 million in the Mackenzie Valley Fiber Line, nearly $12 million in adult education and training, $5 million in economic diversification, and $3 million in tourism and parks. We have also invested more than $19 million in government services, including $3 million in service delivery improvements, almost $2 million in cannabis implementation, $2 million in intergovernmental relations, and $1.5 million in devolution implementation. We have also invested millions in literally building the Northwest Territories during the term of this government, Mr. Speaker, including our biggest ever capital plan in the current fiscal year. Over the past 4 years, we have invested over $155 million in the new Stanton Territorial Hospital and another $92 million in other health facilities in communities around the Northwest Territories. We have invested $44 million in schools and $88.5 million in Northwest Territories Housing Corporation capital. We have invested over $112 million in community capital throughout our community government capital formula funding. During this Assembly, in addition to the Stanton Territorial Hospital, the Government of the Northwest Territories celebrated the completion of 2 other major capital projects, the Inuvik to Tuktoyaktuk Highway and the Mackenzie Valley Fiber Line. Looking to the future, we have invested almost $114 million in the Tlicho All-Season Road and $142 million in other road projects under the Building Canada Fund. With the planning and permitting work now complete, I am pleased to note that Minister Schuman will be hosting an official groundbreaking ceremony in N.W.T tomorrow with representatives from the Tlicho government and a number of MLAs and ministers to mark the start of work on the Tlicho All-Season Road. We are also advancing energy, transportation, and other infrastructure projects in partnership with the federal government through the Investing in Canada Plan and the National Trade Corridor Fund. We continue to advance the Mackenzie Valley Highway, Mr. Speaker, as well as the Slave Geological Province Corridor, 2 important roads to resources that will help unlock our territory's potential and create jobs and economic opportunities for our residents and all Canadians. Our government has also made substantial investments in energy during the life of this Assembly, addressing multiple priorities, including economic development, cost of living, and climate change. This includes projects like a 40-kilowatt solar project in Toledo and a Inuvik wind project. We have secured federal funding for a new and more efficient generator in Sax Harbor and for upgrades to the Snare Forks hydroelectric facility. We continue to collect wind data in Norman Wells, Sax Harbor, and Snare Rapids, and are monitoring water flows in Gamity to assess the potential for a mini hydro project. We continue to work with the federal government to advance the Tulsan hydroelectric expansion project, Mr. Speaker, and have secured $2 million in funding already, with a commitment for a further $18 million over the next 3 years. These efforts have been guided by our government's integrated approach to addressing energy and climate change that was announced in May 2018 with the release of our 2030 Energy Strategy, Climate Change Strategic Framework, and Petroleum Resources Strategy. The government of the Northwest Territories recognizes that Northerners care deeply about the land, environment, and wildlife, Mr. Speaker, and we have worked throughout this Assembly to reflect that concern in our actions and decisions. Earlier this week, our government was part of the celebrations in N.W.T to announce the creation of Tai Dene Nene with the Government of Canada, N.W.T Dene First Nation, Dene New Coin First Nation, and N.W.T Métis Nation. The new national and territorial parks that will be established on the east arm of Great Slave Lake represent the culmination of a 50-year dream for the people of the region that our government was pleased to be part of. We have also continued to take steps to manage and protect wildlife in the Northwest Territories, including the implementation of significant new regulations under the Wildlife Act and the creation of a boreal caribou recovery strategy, a Bathurst caribou range plan, and a boreal caribou range plan. We also recognize that a strong territory starts with strong people, Mr. Speaker, and we have continued to support healthy, educated people over the 4 years of this Assembly. During this Assembly, the Government of the Northwest Territories undertook a comprehensive analysis of labour market skills and launched the Skills for Success initiative to improve employment success for Northwest Territories residents, close skill gaps for in-demand jobs, and more effectively respond to employer and industry needs. We completed the Aurora College Foundational Review and have responded with a plan to create the first polytechnic university in the Northwest Territories, built around our existing campus communities and community learning centres that will create new and expanded post-secondary educational opportunities for our people. We continue to invest in the college, including a $10 million centre for mining and industry training we opened in Fort Smith at the beginning of this year. We have completed the rollout of free optional junior kindergarten to all communities during the life of this Assembly, Mr. Speaker, giving Northwest Territories families more options and flexibility, and giving our kids the support they need to grow and develop right from the start. Our government has also launched a new community-based child and youth care counselor initiative, Mr. Speaker, aimed to provide critical mental health supports and counseling at the community level. We have invested in a new long-term care addition for Woodland Manor in Hay River, a new health centre and long-term care facility in Norman Wells, a new health centre in Fort Resolution, and the Jimmy Erasmus Seniors Home in Betchico. During this Assembly, the Government of the Northwest Territories has also completed a significant transformation in the way that health services are delivered and managed with the creation of the Northwest Territories Health and Social Services Authority. The new authority has helped to break down systemic barriers to efficient and effective care and service delivery, and built the foundation for a system with improved accountability and performance informed by regional wellness councils. We also understand that we must meet people where they are at, focusing on the needs of the individual, not our systems and processes. That is why our government has introduced a cultural safety action plan for our health system to create an environment free of racism and discrimination where people from all cultures and identities feel safe. It is also why we have embarked on a new primary care reform initiative that will ensure our health system is based around the needs of the patient and their families, focusing on outcomes for our people. We continue to invest in justice in our communities, Mr. Speaker, including a new women's correctional facility that will be opening in Fort Smith at the end of this month. This brand new facility has been designed to provide female offenders with culturally appropriate programs and activities meant to help them become productive, healthy members of their communities. To support safe communities, our government has agreed to construct 45 staff housing units at the request of the RCMP in 5 communities, including Fort Simpson, Fort Smith, Hay River, and Inuvik and Norman Wells. Our government has also continued to address the critical need for housing in the Northwest Territories, including convening the first ever Northern Housing Summit in Inuvik earlier this year and successfully negotiating for $36 million under the National Housing Strategy and a $60 million carve-out under the National Housing Co-Investment Fund. Earlier this month, the government of the Northwest Territories opened a new seniors nineplex in Fort McPherson and a 17-unit singles building in Inuvik. We have invested in supportive housing projects in Fort Simpson, Betchico, Atlavik, and Fort Good Hope under our Northern Pathways to Housing program. We partnered with the Salt River First Nation to open 2 housing units and also partnered with the Centre for Northern Families to open 8 semi-independent units for people who are experiencing homelessness in Yellowknife. We know homelessness is a challenge across the territory, Mr. Speaker, and each year the government of the Northwest Territories works across departments and with many different service providers in communities all across the North to provide programs, services, and funding intended to support community members who may be experiencing homelessness or other related challenges. We continue to work on this issue through innovative approaches like Housing First, integrated case management, and the Homelessness Assistance Fund. We have increased resources to address this issue, including the new Combined Sobering Centre and Day Shelter in Yellowknife. Mr. Speaker, today is day 90 of our sitting days in this 3rd session. Session is a major focus for the public and for us as members, but we need to remember that government is a 365-day-a-year business. We have accomplished a lot since the first session of the 18th Assembly took place on December 17, 2015. We should be proud of our accomplishments as an Assembly. I want to thank members who have worked with us on behalf of the people of the Northwest Territories, and I want to thank hard-working members of the public service who have supported us in turning our priorities into plans, policies, programs, and services for our residents. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Massey. Minister statements. Minister statements. Member statements. Member for Yellowknife North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as we wrap up the 18th Assembly, it is my privilege to confirm what most folks already know, that I will be running for a 2nd term, and I am excited and energized to hit the campaign trail. To the constituents of Yellowknife North, Yellowknife has never failed me. Being entrusted as your representative and decision maker at this level has been an incredible honor. It's been a dream come true to be your MLA for this unique, stunning, and diverse riding. Mr. Speaker, I have enjoyed so much about this experience and being a part of this consensus government. I especially enjoyed my role as the chair of the Standing Committee on Economic Development and Environment. To all of my MLA colleagues, I applaud you for your commitment and thank you for your dedication to our territory. To the amazing Assembly staff that supports us, it's been a tremendous pleasure working with all of you. We, as regular members, all members, would be lost without your tremendous effort and dedication. To my constituent assistant, Keith McNeil, you carried a lot of the weight of my day-to-day workload, and you did a fine job of it. I can't thank you enough. Outside government, we work with Indigenous leaders, community leaders, NGOs, and business leaders. Their knowledge and insight has helped me to understand my role and the importance of collaboration and respect. You have my utmost respect, and I thank you for your wisdom. I came to the Assembly with experience in municipal government. My views may have been somewhat narrow, but the many Northerners I have met and worked with have helped me to understand our territory much better. I am proud to be part of this great territory and appreciate what it has to offer, which is a lot. Mr. Speaker, our form of government is evaluated by our citizens and also people throughout Canada and around the world. I've always believed I have an obligation as an MLA to stay focused on the long-term benefits of our territory. We are doing great things, but there is plenty of work to be done. I will continually pursue the best interests of my riding and all the citizens of this great territory. It has been an honor and a privilege to serve the city and territory that has given so much to me over the years, and I am thrilled to continue on this journey. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Massey. Member statement. Member Ike Godin and the member Cam Lake.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I reflect on the work of the 18th Assembly, I think back to the early days when we set our priorities and the ambitious mandate that was put forward by all members of this House. It is the spirit of compromise and cooperation that was the through line for this Assembly. It's contrary to sensationalist claims of a dysfunctional institution. One need only look to our record to see that the vast majority of decisions, laws, and government spending have nearly always received unanimous support of this House. To focus on our differences is to do a discredit to what has brought us together, which is service for the people of the Northwest Territories. Is our system perfect? No, of course not. There are clear deficiencies in our democratic institutions, as there are in all democratic institutions, but I've been invigorated by the debates we've had on this subject, both in this chamber and in public forums. I look forward to seeing the 19th Assembly continue the debate and find new and better ways to strengthen our parliamentary traditions and achieve meaningful democratic reform. On this final day of session, I would like to thank all those who have supported me over the years, my constituents, my hardworking staff, my friends, and most importantly, my family, who have stood by me always. I would also like to thank my honorable friends in this House. I have learned something from each of you and will never forget the time we spent together in service of the people of the Northwest Territories. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Massey. Member statement. Member Ike Godin and the member Sahtu.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I too want to make closing comments as we conclude our last sitting day and recognize a lot of people out there and a lot of accomplishments that I'm hoping that I have made and contributions to fulfilling the platform that I sought out 4 years ago, and recognize the government support for the people out there. As an example, there's many social challenges in our remote communities, particularly, and having served the Sahtu of 5 communities without an all-seasonal road really makes it of seasonal challenges to fill your grocery shelves, for example, and accessing a road trip. Those have to be scheduled. And I really support the recognition of the Sahtu leadership and the Sahtu residents, and I thank them for their support throughout the last 4 years. I also want to thank my family that looked after our home while I was away, and that gave me comfort to concentrate on the challenges to be addressed in this assembly to bring prosperous hope to the people of the Sahtu and to the territories as well, with a number of highlighted resources pledged as identified in the Premier's statement today. To give you some examples here, in particular, I campaigned on the Mackenzie Valley Highway, and I was quite happy, I would say, or pleased this morning to reflect on what we've done in order to achieve where we are today in that regard. We've got a regional office in the Satu region now, based in Norman Wells, bringing employee benefits and employee security to the region. And the Department in Infrastructure did nothing but help to make that a realization. And realizing and continuing on with the services, our government purchased some barges. Now I can feel free to go to the communities and say, you've got a supply chain that would fill up your resupply of petroleum products in your homes. Mr. Speaker, I seek unanimous consent to conclude my statement. Masi.
Masi. Member statements like in a diet, such as who are the Canadian, the Amik annual. What do you get anyone? Member Satu, such a no, go not that.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, colleagues. In the area of health, there was a number of problems that was brought to my attention, and I come to realize that this job is really not what it may seem to be on the audio. I've many a times thought about that when I've seen my predecessor on audio, wondering what did they do outside of that. Now I've seen it from the inside, and I can really say and respect the colleagues that decided to set aside time from their life to work for the people. And in that regard, I've grown to respect all members of this House and recognize the continued support from the staff of this House and the staff from the department that make them look good. In the area of the health department, there was a number of suicidal challenges facing.
Member Satu, you're supposed to have a concluding remarks, not another member statement.
I'm hoping that I'm trying to capture a lot here. That's why the opposition is just smiling. Nevertheless, I think we made a change, and I hope. I'll just summarize, but I'll go back home and mention that to the leadership. I thank everybody, and thank the former members that brought us advice when we became newcomers to this assembly. Masicho.
Masi. Member statement. Member Ike, good day, and the member Tuna Day Holiday.
Mr. Speaker, due to dan paralas nailesi ja banastiu dan papahitasi resi. Mr. Chairman, I served as Chairman of Priorities and Planning. I'd like to thank support staff that we had in the room. I'd like to thank, and I'd like to name them, Lee Selleck and Stephen Dunbar, Doug Sharty, Sarah Kay, Michael Ball, and Glenn Rutland. I'd like to thank my constituents. I have a constituent up there today, in fact, and constituents back here. It was very good work working with the constituents. I'd like to thank my family, my mom, my siblings, my children, my spouse, Monique. I hope that I've made a difference in the work that I've done. I know that it seems like we're doing a lot of work. At the end of the day, it always feels like there's so much more to do. It's a difficult place to leave, and representing people, because you never know what is coming. I guess you'll never know if you don't stop. You never know what is to come, what better opportunities maybe other MLAs could bring to the riding that I currently represent. but mainly I had represented 4 communities. I'd like to again just thank the constituents, not so much the leaders. I talked about them yesterday in my reply, but definitely like to say thank you, Marcy Cho, to the people of Untitled. Merci.
Merci. Member statement. Member Ike Godan and the member Nehende.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank the residents of the Nehende riding for giving me the privilege of representing them for the past 4 years. I am and always will be humbled for being elected to this job. It is about the people. I am representing their voice and their ideas. To the community and regional leadership, these past 4 years, I enjoyed your honesty and frankness as we try to address concerns and issues with the N.W.T, federal government, or others. I would like to thank you for opening your homes, offices, and community to me as we work for the residents of the Nehende. To the Nehende residents, thank you for trusting me to address your issues. I'm honored you feel comfortable to reach out to me at any time during the day to discuss your issues. It wasn't about trying to get the issues completely addressed, but being successful to help the residents move forward. I would like to thank those who were my sounding board advisors. I appreciate the time and direction you would offer throughout these 4 years. Your ideas and concerns help me do my job better. To my constituent assistants, I would like to thank them. There was Pearl Norwegian, Mary Drake, Maya S.J., Deborah Richards, and Charles Blondin for doing a great job running the Nehende office. Their commitment and professionalism were a great asset to the residents and myself. They were the first face you saw, and they were always making people feel comfortable to come in and share their concerns. I could not have been as effective without them. To my colleagues of the 18th Assembly, I'd like to thank you for all your help as we move forward for a better N.W.T. I know there were times when we didn't agree. However, this is what makes life better. We have to work together to get things done. We should all be proud of the work done during this Assembly. To the unsung heroes of the N.W.T, thank you for all the work you do for the residents of the N.W.T. Sometimes it's hard, but you do it with job well done, with professionalism. I appreciate the important work you do for the residents. Sometimes we don't say it enough, but thank you. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank Mr. Speaker, I'd like to get unanimous consent to conclude my statement. Thank you.
Merci. Member statements. Okay, na dait sadza suha tane carrying amik anyone. What do you get anyone member Nehende sadza no giona data.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will now be the last time asked for your unanimous consent to conclude my statement this session. Yeah, this session. From the bottom of my heart, I would like to thank all the legislative staff and the executive branch staff. You were so helpful and supportive. They were very important as we did our work, and they helped give us good direction. To friends and family, thank you for your support throughout these 4 years. I know I missed some important life events, but you're very understanding of this. Finally, I'd like to thank Miss Grace. I know I'm not supposed to thank her, but I'm going to anyway. She has been and always will be a big part of my foundation. She's made sure to balance my life, and I'm thankful for this. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Merci. Member statement. Member go down and the member Mackenzie Delta.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank my constituents of Aklavik, Fort McPherson, and Sigitchik for the honor of representing the Mackenzie Delta, me and my children, for the love and support, especially while I'm away from home for session, committee work, and constituency business. Also to my constituency assistant Liz Wright in Fort McPherson for your hard work and dedication over the last 8 years. I'd also like to thank Eugene Pascal from Aklavik for being my contact person, helping when needed with constituency work. Mr. Speaker, last but not least, I'd like to thank my colleagues, yourself, Mr. Speaker, Cabinet, and regular members. When we first started, we had an ambitious mandate for the 18th Assembly with 230 mandate commitments. But working together, we completed 202 with 10 in progress and 18 unfulfilled, which is a success. Also to the MLAs that have decided not to seek re-election, I'd like to thank you for your service, for your constituents, and the Northwest Territories. Our Premier hasn't announced yet, but whatever you decide, I will respect and honor. Mr. Speaker, with our election this fall, I'd like to wish all the candidates all the best on the campaign trail. I will be running myself, as I already announced, but you just never know in elections, and I always put my faith in the Lord. Whatever He decides, I will respect, and I'd just like to wish you all the best, and it was an honor working with you all. Merci, Mr. Speaker.
Merci. Member statement. Member Ike Godan and the member Decho.
Merci, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker,
Mr. Speaker, today is good. It seems like a new day for us. Dusan.
to stand in this House many times on behalf of the people of the Decho riding. This truly is a special place of united people for the good of the N.W.T. 4 years have quickly passed. I have to say a few words of gratitude to some people that I'm blessed to have in my life. I must say that I'm blessed with my children and my grandson. And yes, winter is dawning. I'm grateful and appreciative from the support of my relatives and extended families throughout Decho and Denide. Mr. Speaker, I represent the most beautiful riding of the Decho. The people and communities of Hatlo Deche, Enterprise, Kakiza, and Fort Province are one of a kind, the Dene, Miti, and Mulla. Thank you for your engagement and talks, whether we agreed or not, or just chit-chat, Masi, for those moments. I'd like to thank my friends and colleagues of this House, Masi. I'd like to thank Premier MacLeod for his leadership, and the Cabinet, and the ministers, and the departments, and the staff that make the wheels go around. And yes, last but not least, my constituency assistant, Tricia Landry, and her family, and the rest of the staff that work behind the scene. And thank you to yourself, Mr. Speaker. Merci.
Merci. Member statement. Member Ike Godan and the member Nanakput.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to just start off by looking back in the last 4 years. And Mr. Speaker, we've learned a lot. We've learned a lot as regular MLAs, working with Cabinet. It's not an us or them, an us versus them system. It's consensus government. Mr. Speaker, this past week when we passed all of these bills, it showed how consensus government works. And Mr. Speaker, I'm proud of that, actually. Coming from a small community, it really did voice my concerns from my region, coming from the most expensive region in the territory. Maybe in Canada, maybe in this world, Mr. Speaker. When you think about it, the cost of living in the north is higher than anywhere else. And for myself to be able to express the concerns, whether it's health, the cost of fuel. Mr. Speaker, working with our cabinet colleagues, I think the relationships that we've built during this time, this 4 years, it's such a short time. You know, when you think about it, I'm grateful for the conversations. I've learned a lot. I've learned tremendously from people like Mr. R.C. McLeod sitting there in his office talking about whether it's having a conversation about, we learn more when we talk about our family, and it's a fact. We ground ourselves and remind ourselves that, we're here to do a job, and representing our region is key in what we do. Anyways, Mr. Speaker, getting down to it, I'd like to thank my constituents from Tuktoyaktuk, YELLOWKNIFE, Paulatuk, Saxe Harbor. In my constituencies, I have 4 CAs, and maybe we need to focus on them and look in the next assembly. Maybe we need an office in every region, in every community in this territory. We have GSO offices in most of the communities in the territory. Think about that. We can represent the government better, and it's not always just about us, it's about the people that we work with. And Mr. Speaker, I'd just like to close in saying thank you for being the amazing human being that you are yourself, and 2 other MLAs on this side, from Tunde Willade and from the DHO, for keeping language strong and alive in this assembly. Mr. Speaker, I hope, and looking forward, that we all can work together, and hey, whoever's here next can do a better job than we did, because we can always do better, but we did a lot during this assembly, Mr. Speaker. So I'd like to congratulate everybody here and the staff for being the people that they are to make the Northwest Territories as great as it is. It's an amazing place. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Masi. Member statement. Member Ike-Godin and the member Hay River North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, today is the last day that these members will gather together on the floor of this House, and like everyone else here, I'm thankful to have had the opportunity to be a member of the 18th Legislative Assembly of the Northwest Territories and to represent the people of Hay River. To say it's been an honor is an understatement. When I speak at high school graduations, I always tell the graduates, it's okay if they don't yet know what they want to be when they grow up. It wasn't until I was 35 and I was elected to this position that I really figure out what I wanted to be when I grew up. And if I don't get re-elected, I guess I'll have to figure it out all over again, but that's okay. However, if I'm not re-elected because people think that's what's best for Hay River, then even though I love doing this, I can't complain, because that's democracy in action. It's been said that democracy is the worst form of government, except for all those other forms that have been tried from time to time, and I have to agree. We're extremely lucky to be able to vote for the people who represent us and make decisions on our behalf. Everyone who wants a shot at being an MLA is about to go through a very public, 4-week-long job interview, and at the end of it, we the people each get to have a say on who gets that job. As long as you're at least 18 years old, a Canadian citizen, and have been a resident of the territory for 6 consecutive months as of October 1st, it doesn't matter how much money you have, it doesn't matter what you do for a living, it doesn't matter what your gender is, it doesn't matter what your ethnicity is, or anything else. Your vote counts as much as every other person's vote. And now, Mr. Speaker, there's no reason not to vote, because Elections N.W.T. and all the returning officers who we have here in the gallery today have made voting easier than ever. The first thing you should do is go on the Elections N.W.T. website and check to see whether or not you're registered. The process to check and to register if needed is ridiculously easy. I just did it yesterday. In Hay River, you can vote on the ordinary polling day on October 1st at the Community Hall in the Rec Center, and I assume that once again there will also be a number of opportunities prior to October 1st to vote in the office of the returning officers, who I know from the last election are very helpful and accommodating. If you aren't going to be in the N.W.T. during the election, like most college or university students, you can still vote by signing up for an absentee ballot on the Elections N.W.T. website and choose whether you want to vote by mail or, for the first time ever, Mr. Speaker, online. Like I said, Mr. Speaker, there's no reason not to vote. So I encourage everyone to get out there and exercise their right to have a direct say in our democracy. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Masi. Member statement. Member Ike-Godin and the member Yellowknife Center.
Masi, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we are about to make history here in the Northwest Territories. I am hopeful and I believe that voters will elect the largest number of women members ever. I don't think we'll reach gender parity, but I think we will surpass the goals that all of us set for ourselves for the 20th Assembly this fall. The reason for my optimism is this. In 2007, 10 women ran and 3 were elected. In 2011, 9 women ran and 2 were elected. And in 2015, 10 women ran and 2 of us were elected. By my count, 20 women have announced their intention to run in this fall's election, double the number of candidates we've ever had, and in one fell swoop. And these are 20 well-qualified women: a lawyer, a corporate vice president, an engineer, a community development officer, a land claim negotiator. It's a very impressive list. These women have a lot to offer all the residents of the Northwest Territories if they're elected, and some of them will be elected. I'm predicting 4 based on the historic ratio of those who run and those who are successful in winning a seat. Mr. Speaker, this change has been the result of leadership and hard work. I'd like to thank you for championing the idea of temporary special measures to bring more women into the Assembly. Even though the idea didn't gain traction, it sparked a conversation and interest in other solutions. I'd like to thank the clerk as well for his work on the discussion paper and for his help in creating the special committee to increase the representation of women here. I'd also like to thank all the members of the committee, including the minister responsible for the status of women, the member for Range Lake, my colleague and friend who has worked tirelessly with me every step of the way to figure out how to address the barriers to women's representation. Thanks as well to the committee staff, Jennifer Frankie-Smith and Kathleen Kanuch, for their help planning our travel and writing our reports. We can all be proud of the sea change we are about to witness. Mr. Speaker, I'm going to take a few moments to thank a few more people, starting with my constituency assistant, Craig Yeo, whose unfailing support and hard work has enabled me to do so much good work for my constituents and the people of the Northwest Territories. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to seek unanimous consent to conclude my statement. Thank you.
Massey. Member seeking unanimous consent to conclude her statement. Are there any nays? There are no nays. You may conclude your statement.
Thank you, colleagues. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank my family and friends for their support, especially my partner, Janice McKenna, and my mom, the late, great Ann Little. I will miss her even more during the forthcoming campaign, along with my friend and mentor, the late Ruth Spence. And finally, thank you, colleagues, for helping me to appreciate the diversity of the Northwest Territories and the people we represent. Best wishes for your campaign. I look forward to returning to this House to continue to represent the constituents of Yellowknife Centre and further their aspirations for a safe, happy, and productive life. Merci, Mr. Speaker.
Merci. Member statement. Member Ike-Godin and the member Frame Lake.
Monsieur le Président, je voudrais parler en français, mais il faut que je parle en anglais parce qu'il n'y a pas de traduction aujourd'hui. Mr. Speaker, I'm going to save my reflections and thanks to the replies to the Commissioner's address a little later. I've spoken several times, though, in this House about the often strained relationship between Department of Education, Culture and Employment and the N.W.T. Francophone community. On October 16, 2016, the then Minister said, quote, "That's where we don't want to end up, is in the courthouse and then have a court order against the government," end of quote. That's, unfortunately, that's where this government has gone again on the issue of the directive on French first language school non-rights holders admission policy. On July 2nd, 2019, the N.W.T. Supreme Court ruled against this government in relation to constitutionally entrenched French language rights. The minister did not properly apply the policy on admission of non-rights holder. The minister was directed to reconsider her decision while paying attention to the need for a restorative approach to French first language education. I'm disappointed with the minister's decision again to go to court. Many of my constituents do not understand why our government would continue to spend money on adversarial court proceedings rather than fixing the problem of a faulty ministerial directive that is out of date and too narrow. I'll have questions later today to the Minister on why we continue to devote resources to court proceedings rather than working with the Francophone community and families to ensure our children have access to an adequate Francophone first language school system. Merci, Mr. Speaker.
Merci. Member statement. Member for Range Lake.
Mr. Speaker, I want to take a moment to thank everyone in this Assembly. It's been an interesting process. I think most people know that when I came in, I was pretty street knowledge, knew a lot about programs with my background and knew nothing about politics. I've learned over the 4 years. I thank people who have brought that to me, have provided that knowledge. I think we've done some great jobs, work in this Assembly, and not everyone, but I think I've also made some great friendships in this Assembly as well, and that's something I'll carry with me as well throughout that. I want to thank the many women who stood behind me in my work. I want to start with my staff, Brenda Fowler, Mira Dunn, Sabette Biscay, all wonderful women that have stuck by me and put up with my little antics, but were there for me. I want to thank the hundreds of women in the N.W.T. Although Sabette, I only had the one worker that was actually allocated for me for women in politics, women in leadership. Women came out from every single department all over the place to help with the cause, and those are the unsung heroes. So thank you all for all the support you provided to that. I also want to, of course, thank my family who put up with many late nights. I was not many cooked dinners and lots of sinks full of dishes. Thanks for sticking by me through all of that. As my colleague Emily Green stated, we are seeing more women come up, and I'm hoping that there will be a more of an awareness of the representation that's needed in this House, and we will see more women in this Assembly for the 19th Assembly, and I will be putting my name forward, and I am hoping that I will be, and my colleague will be, part of that wave that's coming. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to everyone for the work that we've done. Thank you.
Merci. Member statement. Member Ike Godan, the member Inuvik Boot Lake.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it has been an honor to serve in this Assembly 2 terms. I think my colleague on the other side said it well yesterday that you only average about 4 years. I'm lucky that I was able to do 2 terms, and I think anybody that goes above the 4 years shows the work that they do for the people of the Northwest Territories. And I just want to say, you know, if you're doing 12 years, you've been doing a good job. Yeah. Tom Bolio, Glenn Abernathy, and R.C. McLeod, you look at the years that they put in, and the experience and the work that they've done for people, not only serving in this House, but serving the territory, is something that needs to be recognized. And just want to thank all of them for their, you know, giving me the advice to do the job that I did and get over that 4 years. Before that, I also want to say that the legislative staff, anybody that doesn't know the work that we do in this House, they're the backbone. They're the backbone that holds this government, this House, and the committees and our cabinet together. And I know there's been a lot of people that have come and gone, and I did recognize some of them last night, but we do have some of them in the House today, and I know there's probably going to be a passing of the torch at some point, but a lot of responsibility. I'm looking at the two of you, and I know you guys are going to be doing a good job, and I just want to thank thank the clerks that I've had the opportunity to work with over these last 2 terms. As I said last night, given me sound advice to do the job that I did. Public service. I've worked in public service for about 14 years, Mr. Speaker, and behind the scenes, outside of the Legislative Assembly, we have a lot of great people that work at the deputy minister's level, senior level, and I just want to thank them. And I want to say that I've been honored to be a minister, working with the departments that I have had the opportunity to work with. And I know we're going to get into recognition of visitors at the gallery later, but at this point, Mr. Speaker, if you allow me, I would like to recognize some people in the gallery at this point. Ronna Sherigan, long history. We worked together in industry, and I'm glad that she had the opportunity to come and work with me in my office and learn about government. She's really been up and going well. Sheila, strong supporter. She's worked for you, Mr. Speaker, worked for me, and I just want to say thank you, Sheila, for all the support that you've given me over these years. Mr. Speaker, I've always recognized Judy McLeod, a constituent of mine, and I want to recognize her again. And also Hilda Cameron, you know, like, and we chatted about this many times, where as the Delta boys that would walk down the hall to Comm 8, Hilda would always ask how we were doing, and always say hi and good morning, and that goes a long way.
Okay, Member Inuvik Boot Lake, there will be opportunity to address those areas as well.
I'll be finished. In the last 8 years, Mr. Speaker, I've never recognized one constituent of Inuvik Boot Lake, and I'd like to recognize him today and thank him for all the hard work he's done. And it's my constituents, Mr. Robert C. McLeod. Thank you for
Masi. Member statement, Member Ike Godan and the Member Thabacha.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's been an honor and a pleasure to serve with all of you over the last 4 years. The Premier has outlined many of the things that we've accomplished, and I'd like to, at this stage, thank all of you, and also the staff that has worked with us over the years. I think in particular of Stephen Dunbar and Heather Riviere, my MSAs over the last few years. We have accomplished much, and I'm particularly proud of some of the legislation, in particular the Ombudsman Act, ATIP, Corrections Act. These were either new acts or improved acts, and Public Lands Act, and progress has been made, but there's clearly much more to do. I attempted to resolve the thorny issue of equity leases over the last few years, and some progress, fortunately, has been made. I was particularly happy over the years to hear from you, Mr. Speaker, and others who spoke languages in this Assembly other than English. I apologize to the French community for my stumbles today. It seemed easier when I was preparing upstairs than it did down here. And when I was referring to the launch of the land title system, I think I used a rather strange date. It should have been 21 2019, not some strange date that I think I might have mentioned. Clearly, I need more work. I undertake, should I be returned, to take more courses at College Nordique. Many years and many roads have led me to this position. I was a lawyer in my former life. I worked on the Main Street, and I also worked on Bay Street. This is the best job I've ever had. And I want to thank all of you. You know, we may disagree, but I hope we're not disagreeable, because there's much we've done, much more to accomplish, and I've been very proud to work with all of you. Thank you.
Merci. Member statement, member Ike Godin, and the member Yellowknife South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I was going to go last, but my colleague to the left of me pulled rank on me. So I just want to take this opportunity to thank the members of Cabinet that will not be running again. I want to thank Minister McLeod, Minister Abernathy, Minister Moses, and thank them for all the support, and of course Tom Bolio. We both got elected at the same time. We're colleagues in the civil service, and so wish him the best. I want to recognize some people in my office, and all of these people work really hard to have a very smooth running machine. So some of them are here, some of them are watching, but I want to recognize Gary Burnett, Melissa Sear, Jennifer Dolman-Saunders, Contessa Steed, Trista Hoagland, and of course Sean Dean, Eileen Marlowe, and Crystal Pitgorachinski, and my constituency assistant Darlene Mandeville. And if I may, Mr. Speaker, I have a couple of Yellowknife South constituents. A lot of people don't know that I had royalty working in my office for many years. I want to recognize a constituent of Yellowknife South, Hilda Cameron, and also another constituent of Yellowknife South, Pat Thagard, who's up there. Yeah, there she is. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I want to thank everybody else, all the members. Wish them all the best, and especially the ones that are running again. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Merci. Member statement, member Ike Godin, and the member Inuvik Twin Lakes.
Mr. Speaker, I did give a long retirement speech back in March, but I think I want to use this 2 minutes and 23 seconds left to thank the constituents of Inuvik Twin Lakes for allowing me to be their representative. I hope that I've represented them well. I hope I've conducted myself well in this assembly. I know we've had our differences, but I would expect nothing less. Some of my biggest debates, arguments if you want to call them, were with people that I consider friends of mine. And that's what we do. So you're doing your job, I'm doing mine, but at the end of the day, I hope we have decided what's best for the people of the Northwest Territories. And to prospective candidates and those that are running again, bring that attitude when you go hit the campaign trail. Don't just tell them that you're going to do something for them, show them that you're going to do something for them. And I think you may even last 15 years. And I think has been one of my trademarks, and I'd like to believe that is that they will allow me to come down and work on their behalf. And we've been thanking a lot of people today, and I think I should as well. Tim Mercer and the Legislative Assembly staff, thank you. I always recall our first conversation. I won't tell you exactly how it went back in 2004, but I've always appreciated your year and your counsel, so thank you. Thank you to the staff that I've had over the years. I've had the privilege of having good people. You surround yourself with good people, that allows you to do yourself better. I've my current executive secretary, Rachel, up in the gallery. Mr. Rob Collinson, who's been with me for my whole 11 years as a minister, provided me a lot of good counsel. I bug him a lot, but he knows. And started out as an employee. I consider you a friend now, and remember I said that at Christmas time. And I've had the opportunity to work with a number of deputies over the year, from Jeff and Mike and Willard, Tom Williams. I'm going to give him the C now because he's a captain. In this assembly, I've had Aaron, Kelly, Joe Dragon, David Sturt. I actually remembered his name, and a lot of you don't realize that I was at a meeting with David Sturt one time, and I'm going to go a little over, so I should seek unanimous consent to conclude my statement. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Merci. Member statements. Like another, so the sewer, the neck carrying the amic annual. What the yak annual? member in Inuvik, Twin Lakes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, colleagues. I was a little worried there for a second that it might not happen. But I was at a meeting with David, and I don't know if she's up here, but he's probably listening. And we're sitting there, and I'm introducing my staff, and for the life of me, I forgot his name. He was sitting right here, and I'm thinking, I should know his name. So I don't know if the committee realizes a lot of times we come before committee, whenever I introduce David Sturt, him and I, we have a little smile. That's where that story comes from. And colleagues, I've it's been an experience working with all you. Like I said before, we haven't always agreed on everything, but I would expect nothing less. You're doing your job, and you do it well. And I have nothing but respect for those that put their name forward, because we do put ourselves out there for criticism. We are criticized, but we take that criticism because we believe in what we're doing, and we have to continue. And lastly, and most importantly, Mr. Speaker, I need to thank my family. I've been fortunate. You only had to tolerate me for 14, 15 years, some of you just 4 years. My wife Judy had to tolerate me for 40 years. We just celebrated our 40th anniversary in July, so had to tolerate me for a long time, and appreciate the support that she gives me. And I'm looking forward to, as I've said so many times, and I'm sure you all heard about my grandchildren too many times, but one more time, I'm looking forward to spending the rest of my life with them. Thank you.
Merci. Member statements. Member statements. Returns to oral questions. Minister of Health and Social Service.
Mr. Speaker, I have a return to oral question asked by Mr. O'Reilly on August 16, 2019 regarding food establishment safety regulations. The food establishment safety regulations were amended as part of the Department of Health and Social Services efforts to advance the N.W.T agricultural strategy and better support the sale of locally produced, low-risk foods, as well as to reflect current best practices and standards for food safety. These amendments reflect engagement with the Department of Industry, Tourism, Investment, Environment and Natural Resources, and Lands in order to support the N.W.T's emerging agricultural and food production sector. Feedback was also received from food establishment operators during routine work of the Environmental Health Unit with permit holders, including active engagement with Yellowknife and Inuvik farmers market operators. For example, the amendments address some of the concerns brought forward to the Department earlier this year in Inuvik around permitting durations and restrictions. Supporting resources such as an event coordinator forum were also developed to assist emerging community market requirements. A version of this forum was piloted with the Yellowknife market prior to being finalized for implementation with these new regulations. These amendments are just one step in developing a comprehensive regulatory framework for safe agriculture and food production practices in the Northwest Territories. Looking forward, the Department has begun work on meat inspection regulations under the Public Health Act to provide the necessary regulatory framework for abattoirs and meat sales. As this work progresses, the Department will participate in work to advance an overall regulatory framework for safe food production and sales in the Northwest Territories. This work will be in partnership with ITI, ENR, and Lands in order to ensure that the regulatory framework that addresses human health, animal health, environmental protection, as well as land use management. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Merci. Returns to oral questions. Returns to oral questions. Recognition of visitors in the gallery. Colleagues, I'd like to draw your attention to visitors in the gallery. I'd like to recognize important work that they are about to undertake on behalf of the whole Northwest Territories. First, I'd like to recognize Chief Electoral Officer Nicole Latour, that's here with us today, Deputy Chief Electoral Officer Pat Thagard, and Absentee Ballot Officer Brenda Norris. I also like to recognize all the returning officers that are here with us this morning for the whole Northwest Territories. The returning officers are here in Yellowknife for their final training session, and it's a bit of a tradition to visit the Assembly's last day of session. Merci for being here with us, And just like to say,
we have a visitor in the gallery. Harriet Quina is in the gallery. She has been working with elections for many years. Everything has been running smoothly, so I'd like to thank her.
Recognition of visitors in gallery. Member for Hay River North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have a feeling this is going to go on a while. I want to recognize the returning officers for Hay River, Ms. Marnie Twig and Ms. Heather Coakwell, who do great work as returning officers, but also do a lot of other stuff in the community as well. So I want to thank them for not just this work, but everything they do. And then my constituency assistant, who hates being recognized, but it's the last day, so I'm going to do it, Ms. Ann Peters. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Merci. Member Mackenzie Delta.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to recognize my constituent, Grace Martin, who will be our returning officer for the Mackenzie Delta, and I know she'll do a great job. Also, our Chief Electoral Officer, Nicole Latour, and all your staff. Merci.
Merci. Recognition of visitors in gallery. Member for South 2.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I too would like to recognize the Chief Electoral Officer and staff, Nicole Latour, and the South 2 Returning Officer, Michael Erb, and also recognize my former CA and my current CA. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Merci. Member Yellowknife North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today I'd like to recognize 4 constituents from the riding of Yellowknife North. Earlier today, providing our prayer song was the member and former Premier, Stephen Kakfwi. I also want to recognize and welcome Andy Young, former fellow City Councillor when I was on City Council, and a returning officer now is Amanda Mallon. And we also have in the House today the constituent assistant to Frame Lake and Yellowknife Centre, Craig Yeo. Thank you and welcome. Thank you for being here.
Merci. Member Cam Lake.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I, too, would like to welcome and acknowledge our elections officers. You are the front line of our democracy, and I very much appreciate the hard work you do. And in particular, I'd like to recognize Ms. Yvette Shredder, the Cam Lake returning officer. I'd also like to recognize 2 people who have been very important to my work as the member for Cam Lake, Mr. Garrett Cochran, who served as my constituency assistant for the first half of my term, and Mr. Mike Birchall, who is my current constituency assistant. I couldn't do this job without you, gentlemen, and thank you very much for your service to the people of Cam Lake. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Merci. Recognition of visitors in gallery. Member for Trinidad-Willowdale.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, I would like to also recognize Chief Electoral Officer Nick Latour, and I'd like to recognize returning officer Antoinette Tony Lafferty from Fort Resolution. And I'd like to recognize Tom Onka and Murrow Sundberg as our interpreters. They don't just interpret for the riding of Trinidad-Willowdale, they also do interpreting for Montfrey, interpreting for Tabacha, people in Tabacha, to people in Hay River North, Hay River South, and Yellowknife. And I'd like to recognize my CA, Pascal Erasmus, and I'd also like to make special recognition of my spouse, Monique Mernier. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Merci. Member Nahende.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I too would like to recognize a couple of people up in the up there. The returning officer from the Nahende, as well as a constituent, Vanessa Waugh, and as well as Nicole Latour, Chief Electoral Officer. We go way back, and welcome to the House. Thank you.
Merci. Member Frame Lake.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. I too would like to recognize a constituent, Mr. Tamlin Gilbert. He's going to be serving as one of the returning officers in the upcoming election. We also, of course, have Nicole Latour, the Chief Electoral Officer, and I want to thank her for her work at improving elections and electoral reform in general. And then want to recognize returning officer for Frame Lake, Ms. Mona Durkee. Might be by to see you in early September. And lastly and not least, my constituency assistant, Craig Yo. No matter what he did to try to make me look good, it often just didn't work. Merci, Mr. Speaker.
Merci. Recognition of visitors in gallery. Member for Yellowknife Centre.
Merci, Mr. Speaker. Craig is my constituency assistant as well, and if Kevin was a better listener, he would have had better results. Thank you, Craig, for everything that you've done for us. I would also like to recognize Nicole Latour, who is my constituent, and the returning officers who are here from Elections N.W.T. I look forward to a good campaign. Thank you.
Merci. Hatungut Zaguyan Digi ki Hudzami ki Gudani de member Decho.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to recognize the Chief Electoral Returning Officer, and also at the same time, I just want to say thank you to our translator as well, Joe Tambour from Untitled First Nation, being a South Slavery translator for the duration of the session here. Merci, Mr. Speaker.
Merci. Hatungut Zaguyan Digi ki Hudzami ki Gudani de member Nanakput.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to recognize Mr. Pascal Erasmus. Yesterday mentioned that he worked for myself and Mr. Bolio, representing the right opportunity ability. And Mr. Speaker, when you have, I'm going to go on this again. When you have someone working for two different ridings, it really broadens their horizons. And I see that in Pascal, and I appreciate the work that he's done. He's written some good statements over the past couple of weeks. And also all the staff, like there's many all over that have responded to some emails and some really pressing issues that affect constituents social, maybe even financial ways in life. And I'd like to say thank you for everybody for the work that they have done and the responses that they do. They represent their ministers very well. The relationship that we have with the ministers it's in person, but the real work that people do is behind the scenes. So I'd just like to thank them for that. I see a lot of them sitting up there behind me. And also, Mr. Speaker, a general stat, I don't know if anybody, might be a useless statistic, but I'll probably walk through 2 doors today, and I'd like to thank those 2 people in advance that might open those doors for me. So thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Almost a member statement. Recognition of visitors in a gallery. Member for Tabacha.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. They're not constituents, but I'd like to recognize Heather Riviere and Brittany Goss, who have helped me over the last number of years. Thank you.
Merci. Recognition of visitors in gallery. Member for Inuvik, Twin Lakes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I would like to recognize my wife, Judy. I appreciate all the support over the last number of years. It makes it a lot easier. I think somebody pointed out that they have to look after the home front while we're down here, and done a great job. So I'm looking forward to spending a lot more time at home. I'd also like to recognize a couple of residents of Inuvik, I think, are here with the returning officers, Mr. Chris Garvin. Good to see you here, Chris. And Mr. Mitchell Carey, welcome to the gallery. And I failed to thank my constituency assistant in Inuvik before, who's been with my office for 9 years. And thank her for the Charlia, thank her for the service she's had. And thank you, Mr. Speaker, very much for our friendship over the last 14, 15 years. Hope it continues. Thank you.
Yeah, certainly will continue. Recognition of visitors in the gallery. Member for Grayslake.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to take this opportunity to recognize 3 people in the gallery who have been incredibly important to me over the last 3 years as both an MLA and as a minister. First, I'd like to recognize Kathy Olson, who is not only a constituent of the Great Slave Riding, but has been one of the most amazing constituent assistants that I've ever had. She has helped me keep my office in order and make sure that I am responding and working for the residents of the Great Slave Riding on a daily basis. I'd also like to recognize from my ministerial office, Remy Ireland, who is, in my mind, probably the greatest executive assistant that I've ever had, and has been a gem and an amazing person, has kept my office in order, as well as Susan Laramie, who has been a special advisor for me for the last 4 years. And I often say she's the one who makes sure I make it where I need to be, when I need to be, and remember which speaking notes I'm supposed to be talking from. So I'd like to recognize these 3 amazing people in the gallery and thank them for all their incredibly hard work. And I'm going to miss them. I'm going to miss seeing them every day. But at the same time, Mr. Speaker, I am incredibly excited to be putting down my phone so I don't have to take calls 24 hours a day, and I'll be able to spend some incredible, uninterrupted time with my beautiful wife, Carolyn, and my amazing 16-year-old son, John Russell Smith Abernathy. Thank you.
16 months. Masi, for the record, that's 16 months. Recognition of visitors in gallery. Member for Range Lake.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I know you're going to get mad at me, but I want to take a moment more, probably. I want to start by recognizing the Native Women's Association of the Northwest Territories. I'm not going to read off their names, Mr. Speaker, but I want to say that this organization has stuck behind me 100% for the last 4 years with no lateral violence, with no backhand. They have been behind me as an Indigenous woman, and I sincerely thank you for what you do for Indigenous women. Thank you. Mr. Speaker, I also want to recognize in the House my sister-in-law, Karen Cochran, is here, married to my brother. Welcome, Karen. My nephew Garrett is here as well. And, Mr. Speaker, a little bit emotional, the most important woman in my whole life is here today. My mother is here in the House, Miss Shirley Cochran. She has never stepped foot in this assembly before. I apologize, Mom, over the last 4 years, I've only been able to see her 2 or 3 times because of the job. I love you to the world. Even though I don't see you, you are the most important thing in my life. And thank you for being here. Thank you for having me. I owe everything to you, Mom. Thank you.
Masi. Hatunga Tsagoyandigi ke Huzami ke Godani, the member Inuvik Boot Lake.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to recognize Mr. Chris Garvin joining us here today from the constituents of Inuvik Boot Lake. I'd also like to recognize, as I mentioned earlier, Sheila Cuchilia, who has been a very strong supporter, not only for my office, but for all members, and providing information to members of the Legislative Assembly. I know she's going to continue to do great work. And Ronna Sherigan, she's been doing a really great job, and I know that you're going to have a good future in this House, as well as, of course, Judy McLeod, Hilda Camrand. And just for the record, Mr. Speaker, this is my last day in the House. I would like to recognize a very special constituent that's done a lot of hard work for territory, the N.W.T, nationally, internationally, regionally, local, and that special constituent is, I'm not going to say his middle name, but I'm going to say it's going to be Robert C. McLeod. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Masi, hatunga zagayande gike huzami ke godan the member Hay River South.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to recognize today in the House Marnie Twiggy and Heather Coakwell for their continued work with the N.W.T elections and the coming up elections. I'd like to welcome Mrs. Trennert to the House today as well. Nice to see Mrs. Trennert. I didn't do any closing minister's or member statement, but I want to take 1 second to thank everybody for the last 4 years. But I think most importantly for me, I want to thank the Premier. This has been a tough 4 years, and he's been a mentor to me, and he's an honor serving us for the Northwest Territories. Thank you, Premier.
Recognition of visitors in gallery. Recognition of visitors in gallery. I think there's a couple individuals that we didn't highlight earlier, but they're here with us today. And that's from Government House Leader's Office, David Hastings and Soledad are here with us today. Thank you for being here. Masi, thank you for all the services. And if we miss anyone in a gallery, thanks for being here with us. It's always great to have an audience as part of our proceedings. Masi Chop. Acknowledgements. Acknowledgements. Oral questions. Member for Nahende.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, today my questions are for the Minister responsible ENR. Mr. Speaker, in the Nahende riding, in particular Fort Liard and Nahende, we've had some issues with the buffalo, and so the community has reached out and asked, what are we doing there? So can the Minister please provide us an update on what plans they have to help mitigate the problems that these animals are causing? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Masi. Minister of Environment and Natural Resources.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, bison normally come into the community. I was actually in constituency tour with the member a couple of winters ago, and there was actually bison right in the community. We work closely with the community, Fort Liard and N.W.T, to try and address this issue. In Liard, when bison come into the community, we try herd them out by the local renewable resource officer, and we're considering a similar program in N.W.T. Bison do not leave and pose a public threat. They are removed by ENR or a community member with the bison tag. And if the bison are removed, the meat is shared within the community for dry meat. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Oral question, Council Member Nahende.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, can the Minister advise us, has the department staff reached out to the leadership in both these communities moving forward to try to address this issue? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Masi. Minister of Environment and Natural Resources.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we have worked with both communities to develop an Nahende bison management plan that was completed in August of this year, and I believe I may have tabled that a couple of days ago. And that includes approaches to reduce bison-human conflicts, and we've also provided a range of public information to promote awareness of wood bison and ways to avoid conflict. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Oral question, Council Member Nahende.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, when I'm talking to some of the residents in both those communities, they talked about the opportunity to maybe increase the number of tags for outside the region, not just the community. So has the department looked at that potential opportunity? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Minister of Environment and Natural Resources.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. There's a number of options that our department needs to look at. I think we've heard from the member from Mackenzie Delta about their problems with grizzly bears and how if we would consider the amount of tags that are used or allocated. So that's something else we would have to look at in this particular area. We'd have to look at that for the bear problem in the Bodell as well. So we need to take all these factors into consideration as we try and help alleviate the problem of animal-human conflict. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Merci. Oral question. Nundere Council Member Nehende.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I appreciate the minister's answers. And I have to give a big shout out to his department, especially in Fort Liard and Fort Simpson, that do manage these areas here, and they're doing a great job, and they're communicating with the residents, and they're trying to address this issue locally as well. Can the minister advise if the department has reached out to the Department of Infrastructure to look at bordering the airports, putting fences around them, similar to what is done in Fort Providence? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Merci. Minister of Environment and Natural Resources.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we have worked with communities and MACA to fence off some key areas to keep bison out. I think one of the examples is in Fort Liard. And we'll continue to work with the community of Nahanni Butte to explore options for fencing the Nahanni Butte airstrip. Again, our departments will work closely with each other to try find ways to help alleviate some of the problems that they're facing in the Nahanni region with regards to bison. So we'll continue to work on that and ensure that the public safety of the people is our first priority. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Merci. Oral questions. Oral questions. Member for Frame Lake.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. My question is for the Minister of Education, Culture and Employment. In my statement earlier today, I mentioned the difficult relations between our government and the N.W.T. Francophone community over education. Can the Minister tell me how many applications for admissions by non-rights holders that she's received under the 2016 directive, and how many were approved? Merci, Mr. Speaker.
Merci. The Honourable Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll have to take that question as notice. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Merci. The question has been taken as notice. Oral questions. Member for Frame Lake.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Later today, I will table information on costs of mini hydro projects for the Tlicho communities of YELLOWKNIFE, N.W.T, and YELLOWKNIFE. I shared this information with the Minister of Infrastructure earlier today. These projects would allow each community to meet its energy needs, offset diesel for electricity, and could displace home heating oil while significantly reducing greenhouse gas emissions and the cost of living. Is the Minister aware of these mini hydro studies, and can he tell us whether the cost of these mini hydro projects is comparable to the proposed YELLOWKNIFE transmission line? Merci, Mr. Speaker.
Merci. Minister of Infrastructure.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yeah, I'm well aware of these projects. These were led by the Tlicho government. Costing goes back as far as 2009, and these things would have to be recosted to present-day costs. So to compare it to what the present line that we are proposing in our energy strategy to connect YELLOWKNIFE, which we haven't defined as we've discussed in this House yesterday, I can't compare the costs. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Oral question. Nakita Cassie Member Frame Lake.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. I want to thank the Minister for that response. It's my understanding that the costs for some of those projects may actually go down with an all-weather road, providing easier transportation. But can the Minister tell us whether there's been a comprehensive evaluation of energy options for the Tlicho communities that includes mini hydro, transmission lines from various sources, greenhouse gas reductions, and most importantly, perhaps, value for money? Merci, Mr. Speaker.
Minister of Infrastructure.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I don't have that detail in front of me, but what I can tell you about this project is if we connect the transmission line to YELLOWKNIFE, we're going to eliminate 475,000 liters of diesel fuel annually. One of the things that we have to look at this situation is that maybe the member's not well aware of or he isn't thinking about is, in the short term of joining this transmission line to the community of Y.E.L.L.K., the long-term goal is if the Toledo government and the government of Northwest Territories decide to go ahead with the Lac-La-Marque project, which I would assume would be at some point for future growth and supply and help resiliency on the North Slave, the line would help look after that. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Merci. Oral question, Tado Deakasi, member Frame Lake.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. I want to thank the Minister for that information. Of course, we may be able to reduce or eliminate all the diesel for the 3 Leacho communities for the same cost as building the line that the Minister put forward in the infrastructure acquisition plan. So given that there hasn't been this evaluation of options, why are we proceeding with a transmission line? Merci, Mr. Speaker.
Minister of Infrastructure.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think what I've got to clarify is maybe the department has done it. I just said I don't have that level of detail in front of me. We can certainly have a look and check with the department if they've done that cost analysis. But as I've said, we believe in the short term is to join the Y.E.L.K. to the snare system through our transmission line. And once potential growth in the region and industrial development happens, the Y.E.L.K. would certainly feed into that growth and to help stabilize the North Slave grid. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Merci. Oral question, Nundere Akasi, member Frame Lake.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Yesterday, the Minister said this Y.E.L.K. transmission line is about displacing diesel and, quote, potential economic development in that region, and we'll have to build some capacity, end of quote. All I'm asking, Mr. Speaker, is that our government be open and transparent about the purpose of the Y.E.L.K. transmission line. Is this transmission line the best option to reduce greenhouse gas emissions? Who benefits, and does it deliver value for money? Can the Minister tell us whether there will be a contribution from Fortune Minerals, or is the Y.E.L.K. transmission line a public subsidy for the proposed NICO mine? Merci, Mr. Speaker.
Minister of Infrastructure.
Clearly, what we've laid out on our 2030 energy strategy is how to reduce greenhouse gas emissions for the Northwest Territories. Part of that strategy is a T-line to Y.E.L.K., no different than the T-line from Hay River to Fort Providence and Kakisa. We'll have to continue to look at ways to grow our economy in the Northwest Territories and at the same time honor our commitments to the Pan-Canadian Framework on Clean Growth. This is what we've come forward. We've went out and reached out to all the communities when we did our energy strategy, and this is one of our plans going forward to be able to accommodate to meet our obligations. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Merci. Oral questions. Oral questions. Written questions. Written questions. Returns to written questions. Returns to written questions. Colleagues, at this time, we'll call for a short break. We left off after item number 9. Replies to Commissioners' opening address. Member for Yellowknife North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I seek unanimous consent to move to item 11 on the orders of the day. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Members seeking unanimous consent to move on to item number 11 on the orders of the day. Are there any nays? There are no nays. Member for Yellowknife North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to present a petition supporting the matter of Children's Advocate. Mr. Speaker, the petition contains 359 electronic signatures, including 31 electronic signatures of Northwest Territories residents, and Mr. Speaker, the petition's request that the Government of the Northwest Territories create a Children's Advocate position with the Department of Health and Social Services, providing a voice for the decisions affecting children and giving direction in the best interest of children. And further, Mr. Speaker, this petition was originated by Mr. Andy Young of Yellowknife, who is a foster parent. Mr. Young's petition is calling for the establishment of a children youth advocate. The Child and Family Services Act is very clear that decisions regarding children must be made in accordance with the best interests of the children. This petition recognizes that there may be many reasons why decisions need to be made for a children's protection, but emphasizes that decisions need to place the best interest of children first. As a foster parent, Mr. Young understands the difficult challenges that the department faces regarding children needing protection. Nevertheless, he has seen instances where decisions place the interests of the children second to other considerations. Such instances are confirmed in the 2018 Auditor General's Report on Child and Family Services, which states in part that the authorities did not meet key responsibilities for the protection and well-being of children, youth, and their families. The department has now responded with its Quality Improvement Plan, which is a very detailed and ambitious document. However, the conclusions of the Auditor General report emphasized the need for oversight. To achieve that, this petition calls for the creation of a child and youth advocate for the N.W.T. The advocate would review departmental decisions affecting children and, if necessary, provide direction, ensuring that decisions reflect the best interests of the children. And Mr. Speaker, Mr. Young is committed to this issue, and I want to thank him for bringing this petition forward. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Massey. Petitions. Petitions. Replies to Commissioners' opening address. Member for Yellowknife Center.
Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I seek unanimous consent to return to order number 7 on the order paper. Thank you.
Members seeking unanimous consent to go back to item number 7 on the orders of the day. Are there any nays? There are no nays. Member for Yellowknife Center.
Mussy colleagues, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my questions are for the Premier as the Minister responsible for implementing the Cabinet policy on the naming of government buildings. I'll return now for a third time to the naming of the Knob, the new government building that is in downtown Yellowknife. The building opened in the summer of 2015. The naming process started in 2018, and in May this year, the Premier reported that we received many suggestions by public nomination. So I'm wondering when we can expect an announcement on the name for that new building and 2 others. Thank you.
The Honourable Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I updated the House earlier in one of the sessions, the Government of the Northwest Territories received a total of 89 nominations of names for buildings, 3 government office buildings located in Fort Simpson, in Yuvik, and Yellowknife, and we expect to make the announcement shortly. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Merci. Oral question, the Kidade, Cassie, member Yellowknife Center.
Merci, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, can the Premier tell us why there is a delay in making this announcement, given that the nominations have been in hand now for about 3 months? Thank you.
The Honourable Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We have We have received the recommendations from the N.W.T. Honors Advisory Council, and I guess it's a process issue. Some of the names are in a special font or a special pronunciation, which we don't know how to pronounce or difficult to pronounce, so we have to make sure we work out all of these details before we can make a public announcement. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Merci. Oral question, Tada Dayakasi, member, Yellowknife Center.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you to the Premier for that. When the announcement does come, will there be community events or activities planned to commemorate these new namings? Thank you.
Merci. The Honourable Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. That would be my expectation whenever we've opened new buildings or commissioned new buildings. We have done that, and so I expect that would be the case as well. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Merci. Oral question, noted. Oral questions. Oral questions. Replies to Commissioners' opening address. Member for Frame Lake.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. It's not unusual for me to be a little bit out of step with some of the other members here, but it has been my honor and privilege to serve the residents of Frame Lake and indeed all the people of the Northwest Territories. It is an amazingly diverse riding. I've done my best to follow up on constituency matters and hope to do the same in the 19th Assembly. I need and want to acknowledge some people that have supported me, indeed all of us, while we've been here for the 18th Assembly. Most importantly, all of our families that loaned us to this great institution to make decisions on behalf of the people of the Northwest Territories. Thanks to my wife, Suzette, daughter, Amber, and son, Renee. Thanks to all our fantastic staff that keep this place ticking over for us all. They are the unsung heroes of democracy, and few will ever know the sacrifices and hard work that they have made for the Northwest Territories. I wish to especially acknowledge my constituency assistant, Craig Yo, for his dedication and hard work. Thanks to my colleagues in this House. You have put up with a lot from me. I'm the slowest and pickiest eater. I have a healthy skepticism of some traditions, and I'm never at a loss for words, Mr. Speaker. That being said, I think you would have to agree that I do my homework and more. I've been honest and respectful, admitted mistakes, and remain open to persuasion and new ideas. People do not send us here to agree with each other. Differences are healthy and lead to better decisions, even if it is a difficult journey. I especially want to recognize those members who do not live in Yellowknife. You have carried a much larger burden. I have the luxury of going home every evening, even if it is very late sometimes, and being with my family and friends. Thanks for the members from outside Yellowknife for the additional sacrifices you have made. I wish to commend you, Mr. Speaker, for your promotion and support of all of our official languages. Merci, 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 Kwana, and thank you. Special thanks to the interpreters who help keep all our official languages alive. We've accomplished a lot together: a binding code of conduct with an independent integrity commissioner, modernized elections with more opportunities than ever to vote, support for women in leadership, and making this assembly friendlier for those with young families. More of our committee business is conducted in public than ever before, and we have improved communications of our proceedings. We have 911 service for the Northwest Territories, an Ombud for the Northwest Territories, a much improved Corrections Act, leading-edge access to information and protection of privacy legislation, a new hospital that just happens to be in the Frame Lake riding, serious planning towards the University for the Northwest Territories to help us build a knowledge economy, new protected areas legislation that lays out a clear process and accountabilities, and a lot more, Mr. Speaker. Forgive me if I've forgotten anything significant. Much work remains, including action on our climate and caribou crises, system-wide improvements to education, universal childcare, better services for our seniors, adequate, affordable, and suitable housing for all our citizens, completion of Indigenous land rights agreements, and lots more. Whether we are here or not for the 19th Assembly, I'm convinced that we will all continue to do our part to make the Northwest Territories the best that it can be. Merci, Mr. Speaker.
Massey. Replies to Commissioner's opening address. Replies to Commissioner's opening address. Reports of Standing and Special Committee. Reports of Standing Special Committee. Reports of Committee on Review Bills. Reports of Committee on Review Bills. Tabling of documents. Minister of Municipal Community Affairs. Tabling of documents. Minister of Justice.
Mr. Speaker, I wish to table the following 4 documents entitled Government of the Northwest Territories Response to Committee Report 16-18 in brackets 3. Report of the Review of Bill 29, an Act to amend the Access to Information and Protection of Privacy Act. Government of the Northwest Territories Response to Committee Report 34-18 in brackets 3. Report on the Review of Bill 45, Corrections Act. Follow-up letter for oral questions 18-18.3, sexual assault reporting, and follow-up letter for oral questions 838-18.3, South Mackenzie Correctional Centre Therapeutic Model. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Tabling of documents. Minister of Industry, Tourism, and Investment.
Mr. Speaker, I wish to table the following document entitled Northwest Territories Mineral Development Strategy Progress Report 2016-2019. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Tabling of documents. Minister of Health and Social Service.
Mr. Speaker, I wish to table the following 2 documents entitled Follow-up Letter to Oral Question 786-18 bracket 3, Nursing Services in Sigachik, and Follow-up Letter to Oral Question 787-18 bracket 3, New Services in Downtown Yellowknife. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Massey. Tabling of documents. Minister of Municipal Community Affairs.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I wish to table the following document entitled Focus for the Future, a strategic response to the challenge of community government funding, August 2019. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Massey. Tabling of documents. Member for Frame Lake.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. I wish to table the following document. It's an August 22nd, 2019 email from Mr. Penty Showman, YELLOWKNIFE 1,200 kilowatt Nali hydro project. Merci, Mr. Speaker.
Merci. Tabling of documents. Tabling of documents. Pursuant to Section 5 of the Indemnities, Allowances, and Expense Regulations of the Legislative Assembly and Executive Council Act, I wish to table the summary of members' absences for the period December 7, 2015 to August 22, 2019. And colleagues, pursuant to Section 40.23 bracket 2 of the Public Service Act, I wish to table the 2018-2019 annual report of the Equal Pay Commissioner for the Northwest Territories. Notices of motion. Notices of motion. Notices of motion for first reading of bills. Notices of motion for first reading of bills. Motions. Member for Yellowknife Center.
Whereas this Assembly referred the members' conduct guidelines to the Standing Committee on Rules and Procedures for a comprehensive and public review, including a thorough examination of conduct guidelines from other organizations, both parliamentary and non-parliamentary, all relevant legislation, and the rules of the Legislative Assembly of the Northwest Territories, and that the Standing Committee report back to this Assembly during the fall sitting of 2016. And whereas the Standing Committee on Rules and Procedures provided an interim report on the review of members' conduct guidelines to this Assembly on October 25, 2016, and whereas the Standing Committee on Rules and Procedures provided its final report, You Are Standing for Your People, report on the review of the members' conduct guidelines to this Assembly on February the 28th, 2017, and whereas the Standing Committee on Rules and Procedures recommended that the members' conduct guidelines serve as the basis for a new members' code of conduct, including more specific and enforceable provisions, and that the new code be presented to the Assembly for consideration and adoption. And whereas a draft code of conduct for members of the Legislative Assembly of the Northwest Territories was tabled in this House on March 11, 2019, and referred to the Standing Committee on Rules and Procedure for review. And whereas on August 15, 2019, the Standing Committee on Rules and Procedures presented its report on the review of Bill 56, an act to amend the Legislative Assembly and Executive Council Act No. 2, and the draft Code of Conduct recommending changes to the Code of Conduct. And whereas a revised Code of Conduct for members of the Legislative Assembly of the Northwest Territories was tabled in this House on August 21st, 2019, and identified as tabled document 509-18(3. Now, therefore, I move, seconded by the Honourable Member for Great Slave, that this Legislative Assembly adopt the Code of Conduct for members of the Legislative Assembly of the Northwest Territories, identified as table document 509-18(3). Merci, Mr. Speaker.
Merci. Motions in order. To the motion. Member for Cam Lake.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to request a recorded vote.
Merci. Member requested for a recorded vote. All those in favor, please stand.
The member for Yellowknife Centre, the member for Deschaux, the member for N.W.T, the member for Inuvik Boot Lake, the member for Range Lake, the member for Great Slave, the member for Yellowknife South, the member for Inuvik Twin Lakes, the member for Hay River South, the member for Tabacha, the member for Hay River North, the member for Mackenzie Delta, the member for Satu, the member for Yellowknife North, the member for Can Lake, the member for Tunada-Welladay, the member for Nahende, the member for Frame Lake.
Merci. All those opposed, please stand. All those abstain, please stand. The result of the recorded vote, 18 in favor, 0 opposed, 0 abstention. Motion carried. Motions. Member for Frame Lake.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Whereas the proceedings of the Legislative Assembly of the Northwest Territories and all of its standing and special committees are conducted in accordance with the rules of the Legislative Assembly of the Northwest Territories, and whereas the current rules of the Legislative Assembly of the Northwest Territories were adopted on May 27, 2015, and whereas the current rules of the Legislative Assembly of the Northwest Territories were considered by the Standing Committee on Rules and Procedures, and recommendations for amendments were then referred to the caucus of the 18th Legislative Assembly for further consideration and approval, and whereas a copy of the revised and approved rules of the Legislative Assembly of the Northwest Territories was tabled in the House on August 21st, 2019, and identified as tabled document 510-18(3). Now, therefore, I move, seconded by the Honourable Member for Great Slave, that this Legislative Assembly repeal the rules of the Legislative Assembly of the Northwest Territories originally adopted on May 27, 2015, and adopt the newest version of the rules of the Legislative Assembly of the Northwest Territories, identified as tabled document 510-18(3), and further that the new rules of the Legislative Assembly of the Northwest Territories, upon adoption of this notice, come into effect August 23, 2019. Merci, Mr. Speaker.
Motions in order. To the motion. Questions been called. All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carried. Merci. Motions. Member for Frame Lake.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. I move, second by the Honourable Member for Great Slave, that notwithstanding Rule 4, when this House adjourns on August 23, 2019, it shall be adjourned until Thursday, October the 24th, 2019, and further that at any time prior to October 24, 2019, if the Speaker is satisfied, and after consultation with the Executive Council and members of the Legislative Assembly, that the public interest requires that the House should meet at an earlier time during the adjournment, the Speaker may give notice, and thereupon the House shall rise or shall meet at the time stated in such notice and shall transact its business as it has been duly adjourned to that time. Merci, Mr. Speaker.
Merci. Motions in order to the motion. Questions been called. All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carried. Merci. Motions. Member for Yellowknife Center.
Whereas under Section 11, brackets 1 of the Northwest Territories Act, brackets Canada, the Commissioner may dissolve the Legislative Assembly, and whereas under Section 11, brackets 2 of the Northwest Territories Act, brackets Canada, writs for the election of members of the Legislative Assembly are to be issued on the Commissioner's instructions, and whereas under Section 39, brackets 5 of the Elections and Plebiscites Act, subject to the power of the Commissioner to dissolve the Legislative Assembly under subsection 11, brackets 1 of the Northwest Territories Act, brackets Canada, polling day for a general election must be the first Tuesday in October in the 4th calendar year following the polling day for the last general election. Now, therefore, I move, seconded by the Honourable Member for Great Slave, that this Legislative Assembly requests the Commissioner of the Northwest Territories to dissolve the 18th Assembly of the Northwest Territories on August 31st, 2019, to permit polling day for a general election to be held on October 1st, 2019, and further, that the Speaker transmit this resolution to the Commissioner. Merci, Mr. Speaker.
Merci. Motions in order. To the motion. Member for Inuvik Twin Lakes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would request a recorded vote.
Merci. Member requested for a recorded vote. All those in favor, please stand.
The member for Yellowknife Centre, the member for Decho, the member for N.W.T, the member for Inuvik Boot Lake, the member for Range Lake, the member for Great Slave, the member for Yellowknife South, the member for Inuvik Twin Lakes, the member for Hay River South, the member for Tabacha, the member for Hay River North, the member for Mackenzie Delta, the member for Sawtoo, the member for Yellowknife North, the member for Cam Lake, the member for Tunada-Welladay, the member for Nahende, the member for Frame Lake.
Merci. All those opposed, please stand. All those abstain, please stand. Merci. The results of the recorded vote, 18 in favor, 0 opposed, 0 abstention. Motion carried. Motions. Motions. Member for Decho.
Mr. Speaker, I seek unanimous consent to return to item number 5.
Merci. Members seeking unanimous consent to go back to item number 5 on the orders of the day. Are there any nays? There are no nays. Member for Decho.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Merci, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to recognize a constituent, Jim Tom of Fort Providence. Jim is the former chief of the Degagotin First Nations, also the former Decho negotiator for the Decho Tribal Council. Also, he's the former original member of the Fort Providence canoe team that raced down the Mackenzie during the centenary race. And he's also the partner of the commissioner. And last but not least, we all call him Uncle JT. Merci.
The legendary JT. Welcome to our assembly. Merci. Recognition visitors in gallery. Member for N.W.T.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to recognize a couple of special people. I think I have a couple of grandchildren in the gallery. Scarlett and Tucker are both young babies, and also Alyssa. Alyssa, actually, you know, she's doing amazing things. She's working with organizations like the Edmonton Eskimos and promoting. There's so much debate about whether we're Inuit or Eskimo, and what that means to us. And Alyssa is actually helping with that in what she does to educate people and educate people properly. There's so many misconceptions of work. And actually, you know what, even through this government, there's so much good work that the government does, and sometimes it's brought down negatively. And Alyssa is one of the people that actually stabilize that. And I appreciate the work that she does, so I'd like to recognize Alyssa. Also my daughter, Maddie, who's there. And, you know, it's good to see kids around here. Sometimes we spend so much time being serious, we can't even, you know, sit down, have a conversation and laugh. I think we need to incorporate that into the work that we do here, especially with the advice that we get from all the professionals. And I believe my mother, Helen's in the gallery, my wife, Yvonne. Mr. Speaker, family is so important for me, I know. It's been the foundation of everything I do, whether it's here at home or working on projects around this world. My life before coming here was working on projects around this world, educating the general public and also advocating for Inuit in our drive to self-determination. And without family, couldn't do nothing of that, Mr. Speaker. I'm grateful for my parents to actually grow me up properly. You know, I really give credit to my mom and dad for helping me out at a young age. And they sent me away from politics when I was 15. They're like, don't come back until you have a good education or something. And I still don't know what that means today, but I appreciate it. So I'd like to welcome my family, and Mr. Speaker, without them, I don't know where I would be today. So thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Masi, maybe someday those either one of them will be sitting in your chair. Recognition of visitors in the gallery. Recognition of visitors in gallery. First reading of bills. Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move second by the Honourable Member for Yellowknife South that Bill 61, Appropriation Act Infrastructure Expenditure 2020-2021 be read for the first time. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Masi. Motions in order, motions non-debatable. All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carried. Bill 61 has had its first reading. First reading of bills. First reading of bills. Second reading of bills. Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move, seconded by the Honourable Member for Hay River South, that Bill 61, Appropriation Act Infrastructure Expenditures 2020-2021 be read for the second time. Mr. Speaker, this bill authorizes the Government of the Northwest Territories to make appropriations for infrastructure expenditures for the 2020-2021 fiscal year. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Masi. Motions in order to the principle of the bill. Questions been called. All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carried. Bill 61 has had a second reading. Second reading of bills. Second reading of bills. Consideration Committee of the Whole of Bills and Other Matters. Minister Statement 151, 158, 211, and Table Document 442-18-3 with Member Hay River North in the chair.
I will now call for the last time Committee of the Whole to order. What is the wish of committee is how I would usually begin, but today is the day for speeches. I'll keep it brief, committee, no worries. This is the last time the 18 of us will sit together as Committee of the Whole, so I just wanted to say a few words. Prior to becoming an elected member of this House, I really had no political experience. I hadn't really attended any formal meetings, let alone chaired any. So it was a little intimidating to come in here and chair Committee of the Whole right off the bat. But I have to thank all of the members of this House for making my job very easy, especially when you compare this Committee of the Whole to Committee of the Wholes around the country.
The level of civility displayed in this committee is far and above that we see in virtually all other legislatures, not just in Canada, but around the world. It's really not even comparable. There's disagreements, and while some members can get close to the line, some members have gotten really good over the years getting close to the line. The members' ability to discuss and debate has never been hindered by that. I've been fortunate enough to go to Canadian Parliamentary or Commonwealth Parliamentary Association conferences, and I talk a lot with other deputy speakers and other presiding officers, and it amazes me that some of the things that go on in those legislatures, members will stand up to speak and will be heckled so that they can't get their words out. And I hear a lot of stuff like that, and it amazes me, and it makes me grateful that I've been able to chair this committee. I also want to thank the unsung heroes of the Committee of the Whole, those people who ensure that as legislators, we can focus on the issues at hand, and we don't have to worry about having the right papers on our desk or anything else. So first and foremost, I won't say foremost, everyone's important. So first, I'd like to thank the clerks who've been by my side in this sitting. We have Mr. Glenn Rutland, Cynthia James, and with me right now we have Mr. Michael Ball and Jennifer Frankie Smith. In the past, we've had Doug Showerty, Ms. Gail Bennett, and Sarah Kay, and our law clerk Sheila McPherson and Alyssa Holland. And some of these clerks have had decades of experience, and some have had less than me up here in this desk. And so I've learned a lot from those with the experience and those who I basically learned with. So I want to thank them. I also want to thank, I was gonna name everybody, but that's how you leave people out. So I'm not going to name anyone other than the clerks at the table, but I want to thank the people, the back office staff. They're the ones who prepare the motions, who prepare the scripts, who prepare the House documents. And if you've seen the volume of bills and motions and reports that we've been dealing with, you know that that's an amazing feat. I want to thank the sound and broadcasting techs who are the ones on staff and from Pedo Productions who make sure that we can be seen and heard and that the people of the N.W.T can keep their eye on us. And there's been a lot of advances in how we can be seen and heard over this assembly. We're now broadcast over various forms of social media. The satellite and TV broadcast has gotten better, and so I want to thank them for all the work they've done. I need to thank the Hansard staff, the ones here and the ones who work outside of here. Their jobs as keepers of the official record is vital to democracy, and I want to thank them for what they do. The Sergeant-at-Arms, I want to thank our Sergeant-at-Arms staff for helping me maintain order, although I've never had to ask them to escort a member out. I know they would, and I've confirmed that they would. And the security team, I want to thank the security team. When we're here late, they're here later. Same with the guys in the back office, same with everyone else who I'm talking about. And finally, I want to thank the people over at Cliff's Cafe, who I think put in more hours than anyone else in this assembly to make sure that we get breakfast in the morning, and when we go late, we get fed at night. So, once again, thank you all to the members, and thank you all to the staff that make this happen. What is the wish of committee? Mr. Bolio.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Committee wishes to thank you for your work, and the committee wishes that you rise and report progress. Thank you.
Thank you. There's a motion to report progress. The motion is in order and undebatable. Minister Moses.
I want to reiterate, thank you, the members' comments. You've done a tremendous job over the last 4 years in your role as chair, as well as the other deputy chairs. And I just want to thank you for what you've done. Thank you.
Thanks. All those all those in favor? All those opposed? I will rise and report progress. Thank you, committee.
May I have the report, Member Hay River North?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, your committee would like to report progress. And Mr. Speaker, I move that the report of the Committee of the Whole be concurred with.
Do I have a seconder? Member for Inuvik Twin Lakes. Motion's in order. All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carried. Massey. Third reading of bills. Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move, second by the Honourable Member for Inuvik Lake, that Bill 61, Appropriation Act Infrastructure Expenditures 2020-21, be read for the third time. And Mr. Speaker, I would request a recorded vote. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Massey. Member requested for a recorded vote. Motion's in order. To the motion. Member for Cam Lake.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I rise to speak to this appropriation bill, and I acknowledge that there's a bit of levity in the air today, but the business of the House still must get done, and in this case it is passing a very large capital budget. I do not stand in support of this budget on principle, because one of the most important issues to my constituency and to my constituents is the issue of municipal funding and the funding gap that has remained stubbornly unclosed since the start of this Assembly, despite repeated calls for it to be addressed. This budget was the last opportunity to add some additional and much needed funds to our municipalities, and it was not delivered. And after tireless advocating on this side of the House, through business plans, through reviewing budget documents, nothing has still been done. And I told myself that, eventually a line to be crossed, and for me, that line is this lack of attention to the detail. The members on this subject government decisions. It's here to advise government on how to make the right decisions. And in this case, there were a number of projects, and this one is very important to me and my community, that were left on the cutting room floor. And this has happened time and time again. And at this point, I cannot bring myself to support a bill that has essentially been rubber stamped. It's important that the ministers are not just there to explain government decisions to this side of the House, but to hear this side of the House and to incorporate our recommendations into their plans and especially into their budgets. And although there's a lot of great projects in this budget, that fundamental issue, which is so important to not just Yellowknife, not just Cam Lake, but to every community in the Northwest Territories, and it's still unaddressed, that's something I cannot stand for, and I will not stand for this budget as a result. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Massey. To the motion, member for Frame Lake.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. I too will not be supporting this bill and the appropriation. We've got a great last day here, and I do appreciate the sentiments from everybody, and we have accomplished a lot together, but I still need to do my job as an MLA. And in my view, the review of the capital budget was rushed. I wish that we had had more time to carefully consider it and go through it. I did note that there was, I think, opportunities for the regular MLAs to get input into it, but that didn't happen, and I would hope that that changes in the next Assembly, Mr. Speaker. I guess, I know that this is the largest ever infrastructure acquisition plan by our government, and I'm all in favor of investment and creating jobs, but it is a matter of priorities, and sometimes our priorities differ, and I guess that's why I have to get up and say this today, Mr. Speaker. So I'm concerned about the potential to increase our debt as a government. As I said, I'm not sure that I know that I don't agree with some of the priorities set out in this budget. There's a very large portion of it, around 34%, is dedicated to roads. Some of those are winter roads and so on, Mr. Speaker, but when I see a decline in spending or expenditures made available, or money to the N.W.T. Housing Corp at the same time, I wonder about our priorities, Mr. Speaker. So there are a number of other issues, I believe, with the capital budget. The City of Yellowknife had requested assistance with a water line replacement. It asked for $8 million. That support is not contained in the budget. I'd hope to see some progress on with the Mackenzie Valley fiber link to ensure that all our communities are connected and that the promised benefits accrue to our communities down the valley, but that's not to be found in here. I question why there's no funding for visitor services in 3 communities, Tuktoyaktuk, Y.E.L.L.O.K.N.I.F.E, and Yellowknife, and I think that there was a missed opportunity there. Lastly, I'm very concerned about some of the energy project investments in this capital budget. In particular, there's a replacement of the diesel plant in Blitzel-K. I just hope that that includes high efficiency turbines and that or variable speed turbines so that we get the best value for that. But there's also a river, Snowdrift River, right next to the community that has, I think, great potential for mini hydro. And I wonder whether the money spent on the diesel replacement might be better used for hydro, a mini hydro project in that community. And then there's the line, the Y.E.L.L.O.K.N.I.F.E transmission line that I raised earlier today, Mr. Speaker. I'm not convinced that there's been a thorough evaluation of all the options for the Tlicho communities. And earlier today, I tabled some information about the cost of mini hydro projects in 3 of the communities, and I wonder whether we're getting good value for money, and whether the money that might be spent on the Y.E.L.L.O.K.N.I.F.E transmission line might actually fund mini hydro projects in 3 Tlicho communities, allow them to get off diesel, allow them to use electricity for home heating, commercial space heating, make a more significant reduction in greenhouse gas reductions, and lower the cost of living in those communities, all at a cheaper price than the Y.E.L.L.O.K.N.I.F.E transmission line. So I challenge the Minister to make more information available about that and the options, and make sure that the public understands what the real purpose of this project is, whether NICO is making a contribution, that the NICO project by Fortune is, whether this they're making a financial contribution towards this line, and to really look at who benefits as well. So for all of these reasons, Mr. Speaker, I cannot support the capital budget today. Merci, Mr. Speaker.
Merci. To the motion, member for South 2.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, or Mr. Speaker. I support this bill, as mentioned in our vetting there yesterday in Committee of the Whole. They're looking at the bill. I had mentioned yesterday, and I'll mention today, and I'll just give one example. I don't want to go through the whole document. There's a capital cost allowance for a new school in Colville Lake. You've got 2 buildings. This government is supporting education by establishing a new institution there, a new building. With the help of the community leaders, will help design and agree on the color of the building. Right now you have bookshelves dividing classrooms, and the students are told that they have to whisper so they're not interrupting their neighboring classes. So that's just examples that I've witnessed there. There's many allowances. We have acts, we have policies, and I have every confidence that this government has scrutinized and balanced and put forward a legitimate, sound capital plan. I agree with the capital plan. I agree with all the benefits it's going to produce. As the Minister said yesterday, building the school, for example, in Colville, the community will prosper by the paychecks of the father hammering the nails on the building that will house education for their students. I support this bill, Masi Cho. I think we can carry on, conclude. Thank you.
Masi. To the motion. Questions being called to the motion, Minister of Finance.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it's unfortunate, and I didn't want to have to stand up and speak and have to defend $410 million capital budget that provides opportunity for folks across the Northwest Territory, especially in a lot of the smaller communities. I've heard some of the concerns, and I do recall sitting before committee on a number of occasions with this particular appropriation, plus others that we've been working on. So to say that there was no input from committee, I think is misleading the public. And to say that this is a budget that doesn't seem to address the municipal gap, I mean, it's good fodder for the campaign brochures, but members know as well as I do that that's an O&M issue. There has been money put into the capital side of the budget for communities. And Mr. Speaker, I apologize for having to stand up and do this, but I've always thought what we do in here, we need to bring our concern to the floor, but at the end of the day, we take our blinders off and look big picture and see that this is a budget that is good for the people of Northwest Territories, because it allows a lot of projects to get done, and respect to those that see big picture and realize that we need to try to do what we can. And again, I will say, for those that are running and want to come back, I know we'll speak to the budget and to the motion. It's exactly what I'm doing. That come back, and I've said when I didn't run that I wanted to see some new energy for Inuvik, which is true. But I also want to see some positive energy from people across the Northwest Territories, because we have important work to do. Appropriation budgets like this are part of that important work we do. We may not disagree on everything, but at the end of the day, we have to look big picture, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Massey. To the motion. Question's been called. All those in favor, please stand.
The member for Inuvik Twin Lakes, the member for Hay River South, the member for Thabacha, the member for Hay River North, the member for Satu, the member for Yellowknife North, the member for Tunada-Welladay, the member for Nahende, the member for Yellowknife Center, the member for Decho, the member for Nunakput, the member for Inuvik Boot Lake, the member for Range Lake, the member for Great Slave, the member for Yellowknife South.
Massey. All those opposed, please stand.
The member for Cam Lake, the member for Frame Lake.
Massey. All those abstain, please stand. The results of the recorded vote: 15 in favor, 2 opposed, 0 abstention. Motion carried. Bill 61 has had its third reading. Third reading of bills. Third reading of bills. Mr. Clerk, would you ascertain if the Honorable Commissioner Margaret Thom is ready to enter the chambers?
Please be seated. Excuse me. Mr. Speaker, and members of the Legislative Assembly, good afternoon. Sitzera masinethe, good isinie ejo ashuna henatita. Dutzenela erintene cha kotsa kondinatse ke guti egalanda nezu metsakwante eji tsenke dutzenena hetsekosea masi. Masi, I am pleased and honored to once again sit with you in this chamber. I will assent to the bills that you all have worked hard and deliberated upon so carefully. Today marks a day that I imagine is mixed with many emotions, as well as much personal and public planning for each of you. As members of this 18th Legislative Assembly, each of you has become an instrument of change and enhancement within this government. You have acted on the wishes and concerns of the people of our vast territory during your elected term. For that, I applaud you with huge masicho and know that we owe you a debt of gratitude and we have much to be thankful for. Being in politics is difficult, not only for the politician, but for your families as well. As difficult as it is, we must remember the sacrifices your families that contribute immensely to how you function as individuals, as a team player, and as a member of our great consensus form of government. On behalf of the people of the Northwest Territories, I extend my deep admiration and gratitude to your families. Some of you have already announced your intention to seek re-election. I wish you well and every success in your platforms and in your campaigns. If you are elected again and return to this House, know that it was meant to be. If you do not get re-elected, close this chapter of your life knowing that you have done your very best in representing your constituents and the people of the Northwest Territories. Some of you have announced your intention to not seek re-election. Rather, you have chosen to pursue new adventures and perhaps to rest and relax. I applaud you with sincere appreciation for your commitment and dedication in the service to your constituents and to all the people of our territory. I sincerely wish all of you success, good health, and happiness in the next chapter of your journey you will take on from here. In closing, I'm deeply honored to have been part of your political journey. I will keep your kindness and how you welcome me to my role as Commissioner close to my heart. Masicho. Now, as Commissioner of the Northwest Territories, I am pleased to assent to the following bills. Bill 34, the Mineral Resources Act. Bill 45, Corrections Act. Bill 61, Appropriation Act, bracket, Infrastructure Expenditures, bracket, 2020-2021. Masicho, thank you. Huanani, merci beaucoup. Huana.
Order. Please be seated. Well, it's that time of our turn. I would first like to extend our appreciation of this House to the Commissioner, Margaret M. Thom. As always, it's a pleasure to have her in the House today. Colleagues, this is our last day together in the Chamber as members of the 18th Legislative Assembly members. For those who are not seeking to return as members of 19th Assembly, I would like to thank you for your services over the years. and appreciation of all the services that you provided to this institution and to the people of the Northwest Territories. We have previously had the opportunity to recognize the contribution of the member for Inuvik Twin Lakes and member for Tune-a-Day-Will-a-Day. And today, I wish to take a moment to recognize two other members who will be ending their time in the Assembly. First, I'd like to recognize the member for Inuvik Boot Lake. He was first elected in 2011, has served 2 terms. In the 17th Assembly, he served as the chair of the Standing Committee on Social Programs, work which I know he took very seriously. In the 18th Assembly, he was elected by members to serve on the Executive Council and has served as Minister of Education, Culture, and Employment and Minister of Municipal Community Affairs. He has also served as Minister responsible for youth, homelessness, and Worker Safety Compensation Commission. Few can dispute the member's commitment to the young people of the Northwest Territories or his passion for the delivery of replies to questions in this chamber. Mercy for that. Next, I would like to recognize member for Grey Slave. First elected in 2007. Member has served 3 assemblies, 3 terms. In the 16th Assembly, he served as a deputy chair of a standing committee on a social program, which foreshadowed the important role he played in the 17th and 18th Assembly. The member was elected to the Executive Council in 2011 and served as a minister since that time. He has served as Minister of Health and Social Service, as well as Minister of Justice, Public Works and Services, and Minister responsible for seniors and persons with disabilities. He has also served as Minister responsible for Public Utilities Board, Human Resources, and Government House Leader, where he had the chance to work collaboratively with the Speaker, myself. Well, member and I go way back, so kind of gets emotional at times. A member for Grey Slave will be remembered for his approach on various initiatives, his passion for a consensus-style government. The member will be taking time to enjoy his life with his young son, David, and his wife, Caroline. And members, join me in wishing both these members all the happiness they richly deserve. For members seeking to return to this assembly, and all those residents who have and will be putting their names forward to serve as a member of this assembly, these departures leave big shoes to fill. However, I'm confident that the members of 19th Assembly will rise to the challenge. As we reach the end of our assembly here today, it is a time to remind us, all of us, the important truth, this building that we're in. This assembly is about more than people of the Northwest Territories who come and go over time. It is about the people that we come to serve, and we are the trustees of responsible government, not the holders. While not all members of the 18th Assembly may return, your work here will be remembered, as the Commissioner has indicated. A common understanding of a consensus-style government is that we must all agree, but that is simply not the case. We work together. Consensus government is all about voices. Voices of the North that we hear as we move forward with the decisions that we had to make in this House, in this chamber. While we may not always agree on certain issues or certain demands, we will always listen. As members, each one of you has brought us distinct voices to this assembly and to our proceedings. And that will not be forgotten or lost. I want to thank the interpreters who ensure that distinct voices are heard by residents in our official languages. Your work is greatly, greatly appreciated. I also want to thank those pages that have been with us throughout our journey the last 4 years. They've done a tremendous job. They provided us lots of patience, dedication, and simply for being here with us. Thank you. Masi. I also want to thank those contractors who help us out with our jobs. The Pedo Production, the 10-Wind Janitorial, Twilight Security, and ASAP Reporting Services. Finally, I will end by, again, I had to do this again, where the pages, they're the young leaders of the future, and they've been here with us. Your presence in the chamber is very important. Your presence here reminds us that decisions that we make today will certainly and definitely affect your future. So thank you for your services, and particularly the last few days of our session here. Well, for the final time, before Mr. Clerk, I'd like to thank all the members again for being part of this assembly, and just reminding members to refrain from leaving the chambers. There's a special surprise after I come back here. So, Mr. Clerk, orders of the day.
Orders of the day for Thursday, October 24th, 1:30 p.m. Prayer, minister statements, member statements, returns to oral questions, recognition of visitors in the gallery. Acknowledgements, oral questions, returns to written questions, replies to the Commissioner's opening address. Petitions, reports of standing and special committees, reports of committees on the review of bills. Tabling of documents, notices of motion for first reading of bills, motions, first reading of bills, second reading of bills. Consideration in committee of the whole of bills and other matters. Minister Statement 151, 158, and 211-18.3. Table Document 442-18.3. Report of Committee of the Whole. Third reading of bills. Orders of the day.
Masi, Mr. Clerk. Oh, Mr. Clerk. Masi. This House is adjourned until Thursday, October 24th, 1:30 p.m.
Order.